Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's a lovely Wednesday evening. Hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. Thank you so much for being here. And thanks to our folks on TikTok for power tapping, particularly to Abi71 and Olatunji Ways. Thank you so much for getting us to 8.3K likes right now on TikTok. Thank you. Please, the rest of us on TikTok, let's power tap and share the live, and also subscribe to the channel. And if you're on TikTok again, please click on the heart icon above my image and join the team. If you're already a member of the team, please just drop your heart to me or a gift so you can help us get to the FYP. FYP simply means for you page. We want to have the algorithm recommend us to other users of the app. All right. Thank you very much for that. For those of us on YouTube and on Facebook, thank you so much for being here. It's a delight to have you join us. Today, we're supposed to actually have a conversation about Papa's speech. I was already preparing. I think I even have the book here in front of me. But then there was a little, shall I call it, inquiry? Conversation that went around the idea of Ironsi, and had something to do with what happened, the 15th of January and how Ironsi took power. But because I thought that, okay, maybe this would actually help us get into some of the conversations we've not had in a while. And today I felt we might just, want to focus on Decree 34 because of the controversy around that decree and the kind of things that people have said, usually trying to heap the blame on Gowon. And of course, we have historical conversations here. We discuss history, politics, culture, and innovation. So today, we're just going to go down memory lane and discuss what happened in May of 1966. But before we get into all of that, please, if you're on TikTok, kindly power tap and share the live, share with folks that you know. If you're on YouTube, please do the same and also subscribe. And for those of us on Twitter, thank you very much for being here. Please like and repost the live. Thank you very, very much. All right. It's going to be a long one because it's a two-part series. So we're going to listen to Omar Gundia. That's what I'm saying. So listen to the first part. I may not have to... I'm thinking maybe I should read something else when we get to the breaks. Just give me a second, please. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to read the very short description this time around, not as long as we usually have it. Okay, so here's a description of this particular video. There's a story about Nigeria's regions that keeps getting rewritten in casual conversations and online debates. Many people now insist that, 1 second, I'm seeing Feshi Kemi. It's good to see you on TikTok. There's some people I've not seen on the live in a bit. It's good to see some of you. Elenia, thank you for joining. And Osmo. All right, so good to have you guys around. Okay, let me get back to the description, then we'll listen to the replay together. There is a story about Nigeria's regions that keeps getting rewritten in casual conversations and online debates. Many people now insist that Ironsi did not abolish regional system and that its abolition happened under Gowon. That claim has been repeated so often that it sounds settled, even when the documents say otherwise. This video walks through what actually happened after the January 1966 coup and how General Ironsi moved from military takeover to deep structural changes. Decree 34 did not appear in a vacuum. It followed a series of decisions and decrees that steadily dismantled the regional arrangement Nigerians were used to. By the time May 1966 arrived, the consequences of those actions were already unfolding. This conversation traces the timeline clearly. It connects the decrees to their political effects and explains why the claim that regions were abolished in 1967 keeps resurfacing despite the historical record. Here's how Nigeria's regions, or how Ironsi abolished Nigeria's regions with Decree 34. Enjoy. Killed. So lónìí, a fẹ́ sọ̀rọ̀ lórí nǹkan tí àwọn we're talking about coup plots earlier. Well, the very first one that was executed in Nigeria was January 15, and it led to a unitary decree. And that decree actually, one of the core things that was abolishing regional systems, or the regional system, or the regions in Nigeria at the time. Now, for the last 60 odd years, whenever conversations about who abolished the decree who abolished the regions comes up, people just switch and start shouting as you go on. It's not because they know what they're talking about. It's because they want to protect their ethnic group. Because, of course, one person in that place, whatever he does, represents everybody. If he's good, if he's bad, then they have to make sure that you don't say he did something bad, so it doesn't represent everybody either. But here's the point. The point is, history doesn't really care about people's feelings. We're going to share what happened. Of course, facts of history, respectfully shared, communicated in I'll do it as kindly as possible. Okay? So what we want to discuss today is how Ironsi abolished Nigeria's regions. And we'll start, of course, with what happened in the coup. I'll be reading a number of books today. I'll be reading Crisis and Conflict in Nigeria, A.H.M. Green, reading Anthony Enauro's speech. I'll be reading Beckon to Serve by Sheil Shagari. And also, I'll read Educated Elites in the Nigerian Society by E.A. Ayodele. And I'll introduce another book today, which is actually quite nice, Just Before Dawn by Kolio Motosho. So let's get into it. Let's start with Crisis and Conflict in Nigeria. Please, Bartap, enjoy. If you disagree with anything, feel free to write it in the comment section, but don't insult anybody, any ethnic. Don't be saying your Bible like Kinikon or Tinubu is Kinikon. Well, you can actually talk about Tinubu as your president. Is your anything like you want to say about your president, but at least use your sense, use your brain. Can't be writing nonsense like this in the comment section now, please. Let's do better. God bless you. All right, let's go get into this. This is Anthony Enauro's speech. Anthony Enauro's speech, 12th August 1968. Historians will continue to debate whether what happened in Nigeria on 15th January 1966 was a rebellion, a coup, or a mutiny. I believe it's a revolution and a coup. But originally, it was Igbo coup with a facade of revolution. But let's continue reading. Whatever it was, there was a change of government. The civilian administration was removed from office. In the morning of that date, the Prime Minister of the Federation, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, the Federal Minister of Finance, Chief F. Okotiebo, the Premier of the Northern Region, Sir Ahmadu Bello, the Premier of the Western Region, Chief S. Akintola, the second and third ranking officers in the Nigerian Army, Brigadier Malari and Brigadier Demolegun, other senior officers, Colonel Shode Inde, Colonel Pam, and others were seized and murdered. All of them had one thing in common: they were not Igbos. The Premier of the Eastern Region, Dr. Michael Okpara, the Premier of the Midwest Region, Chief Dennis Osadebe, and the head of the Army, Major General Ironsi, the Federal Minister of Trade, Dr. Keom Badiwe, and others in like position were not killed. They had one thing in common: they were Igbos. However, in the morning of the fateful date and for some time afterwards, these facts were not generally known in the country. Major General Ironsi established a federal military government after January 15. He promised to restore law and order, to put down what he described as a mutiny, to deal with corruption, and to restore civilian rule as soon as practicable. In assessing the motives as well what the Northern stance was in 1953, when this same Anthony Enaro moved the motion for independence in 1956, and the Northern delegates said they would want independence as soon as practicable. Well, Ironsi used that same phrase: it will restore civilian rule as soon as practicable. Let's continue. In assessing the motives as well as the consequences of the military coup of January 15, 1966, attention should be drawn to the various interpretations and excuses offered. Firstly, some people saw it as an attempt to end northern domination. Secondly, some regarded this as an attempt to remove corruption in government. Thirdly, others hoped it would introduce an honest and just program of political and administrative reform to correct the structural imbalance in the federation. No one quarreled with these aims. Consequently, there was an atmosphere of general relief immediately after the coup of 15th January, until the pattern of killings which emerged, when the dust had cleared, revealed that this was a coup organized by young Igbo officers in the army. Whatever they may claim was their basic plan, its effect was that civilian leaders and senior military officers from the other areas and ethnic groups were killed, while those from Igbo areas were spared. All non-Igbo senior military officers above the rank of major who were accessible were killed in the January 15 coup. There was only one exception to this, when a junior Igbo officer, half awake through his midnight sleep, was killed in Apapa for refusing to hand over the key of the armory. Therefore, to most Nigerians, the incidents of 15 January were a clumsily camouflaged attempt to secure Igbo domination of the government of the country. This impression was later reinforced by certain appointments and actions of the new regime under Major General Ẹkáàbọ himself and Igbo. The opportunities of January 15 were misused in several ways by the Ẹkáàbọ regime in the months that followed. For a while, every Nigerian hoped that the country would go on to achieve greater progress in its development generally. Unfortunately, General Ẹkáàbọ allowed matters to be taken out of his hands by prominent Igbo leaders in the army, in the public service, and in public life. Affairs in the public service and the armed forces appeared to lend color to the impression that the coup of January 15 was designed to install Igbos in position of power. Right? It was designed to install Igbos in positions of power. Out of 21 promotions in the army in April 1966, for example, 18 were Igbo officers. By the way, this same thing, you find it in the book by Adewale Ademoyega, where it talked about the fact that they promoted 18 Igbo officers, and then they looked around, and they said, may not be like only Igbo, they come pick 3 Northerners, took them ahead of Yoruba officers who were their seniors, 5 of them, took these Igbos ahead, took the Northerners ahead, and so you had 21. But the Yoruba guys who were supposed to be promoted were not promoted. Well, let's read this one. Out of 21 promotions in the army in April 1966, for example, 18 were Igbo officers. General Ẹkáàbọ drew his principal advisors from the Igbo ethnic group. Ethnic groups tend to be chauvinistic, but the Igbos were the most militantly chauvinistic, and this naturally created apprehensions in the minds of the others. Although public inquiries were instituted into the conduct of certain public officers, some of these men remained in positions of power. The public was disenchanted. In the army itself, there was growing resentment about officers killed in the January 15 coup. Non-Igbo officers and rank and file resented the killing of officers from their ethnic groups, while those from the Igbo ethnic groups were spared. Major General Ẹkáàbọ did little or nothing to answer this resentment, which rapidly became widespread in the army. There were continued reports that January 15, 1966 was inconclusive and that plans were afoot to complete the job by the liquidation of surviving non-Igbo officers. The leaders of the opposition remained in prison, whereas it was freely said that some Yoruba army officers had participated in the coup expressly for the purpose of securing their release. In North, after January 15, the people had adopted an attitude of wait and see. In several parts, especially Kano, Katsina, and Zaria, some of the former ministers of the regional government had been molested and jeered at on their return to their provinces. But the situation soon changed because of measures introduced by the Ẹkáàbọ government, which many Northerners believed were inimical to their interests, and because of the publicly provocative and taunting attitude of Igbo traders and workers living in the North, who paraded themselves as the new masters of Nigeria. All advice to the Ẹkáàbọ government to rectify the situation was ignored. Major General Ẹkáàbọ did nothing to remove the impression that the January 15 coup was part of an Igbo master plan to dominate the country. This was the state of affairs in the country generally, and in the North in particular, when the unification decree was announced by Major General Ẹkáàbọ on 24th May 1966. The decree number 34, a major constitutional and political step which, contrary to traditional practices, had not been widely discussed, announced a unitary system of government. Listen to this, please. Pay attention. It announced a unitary system of government, the dissolution of political and tribal parties, and other measures. But the fate fateful words of the announcement were, quote, "The regions are abolished," end of quote. How clear? I mean, can you get clearer than this? He said, the regions are abolished. So the first thing we want to establish the fact that the person who pronounced the regions abolished in Nigeria was not Gowon. It was Ironsi. Before promulgating this decree, Major General Ironsi did not even allow the Constitutional Committee, which he had appointed and which had begun to sit in regional centers, to complete its work, despite his public and written undertaking that no constitutional changes will be introduced until after the fullest consultation with the people of the country. All this caused great disquiet in all parts of the country and led to the May 29 disturbances in the north, in which a number of Igbos were killed. Someone might say, but it was Yakubu Gowon that created state. It was one that destroyed the region. No. Yakubu Gowon created states. He didn't abolish regions. To abolish region means that you take the autonomy away from them. In other words, they were representative of the government, not of the people. The governors of the regions, the three governors, Asan Katsina, Adebayo, and Adekunle Fajuyi, and what's his name now? No, there were four. Asan Katsina, Adekunle Fajuyi, David Ejo, and Ojukwu. They were representing the military government, not the people. And they had no autonomy to just do whatever they wanted to do. So the regional system, the way it was, where each region had its own constitution, that was not to be, because we're now under a unification decree. That was how the regions were abolished. Again, I'm using this book as an introduction to everything I want to read. So let's go to another book now. Please stay with me. I'm going to read about a number of books, but we'll tie everything together at the end, okay? So this time we'll read Educated Elite in Nigerian Society by E. Ayodele. And he says here, the suspicion of Igbo domination grew as Igbos, by the way, if you notice there's a word, you see it in this book and in the other book and in many books. Almost every book written by non-Igbos, whether the books were written by a Northerner, a Westerner, someone from the Midwest, an American, a Briton, regardless of anybody that was writing in that period, will mention that phrase, Igbo domination, because that's the reality of what was happening anyway. So if you hear the word again, I'm not inserting it, it's actually because it's in the book. Okay, so let's go back just a bit. Let me start from this paragraph. It says here, while one must wait until the authentic sources are made available, in Lagos, Benin City, Ibadan, Enugu, and Kaduna, the last four regional capitals at that time, certain facts are clear. It would appear that the educated elites in the army had been infected with tribalism. The coup was executed by and large by the Igbo, witnessed the killing of all northern Nigerian officers within reach and of Yoruba officers suspected of being in sympathy with the Hausa Fulani elite of northern Nigeria. Moreover, no Igbo elite politician and disseminator of tribalism or sectionalism lost his life. In other words, there were Igbos who were major orga of tribalism, including the one who had the guts. And I'm remembering it now with a lot of anger because I read a book this afternoon. Somebody referred to that. I watched the video, somebody referred to his book, and I was like, wait, who? Mbadiwe wrote a book. These were kings of tribalists and bigots, writing books and calling everybody bigots. Meanwhile, that's their identity. But we'll talk about that some other time. Let's continue. So it says here, moreover, no Igbo elite politician and disseminator of tribalism or sectionalism lost his life. The troops in Benin and Enugu under Igbo control refused to murder Dennis Osadebe and Michael Okpara, respectively. But on the other hand, the federal prime minister and Chief Okotie, the Midwestern fighter against Igbo domination, were killed. Also murdered were S.L. Akintola, the premier of the West, and Ahmadu Bello, the premier of the northern Nigeria. In the circumstances, the view began to gain ground that the coup was evidence that the Igbo plan for a takeover of the country was maturing. And there was the fact that the first head of military government, Ironsi, surrounded himself with top Igbo civil servants as advisors. The suspicion of Igbo domination grew as Igbos within the army were promoted to the rank of officers, and the unification decree was issued in response to the minority report of only one member, Onwokedi, an Igbo, and against the firm recommendation of the majority of the committee that had been set up to examine the proposal. Frightened that the unification decree would establish firmly Igbo control all over the country, the peoples of the North in May 1966 rose up against Igbo inhabitants in the northern Nigeria. In the northern region, this first of a series of spontaneous massacres of Igbos was the last straw, which persuaded a number of Igbo leaders that the dream of Igbo domination was beyond achievement. That the size of Nigeria was a factor of loyalty to the tribe rather than to one Nigeria, and that those were strong among the large ethnic groups in the country. That justly or unjustly, anti-Igbo feelings had risen very high in the rest of Nigeria. In the words of the academicians, themselves all the time tribalists, who drew up the argument for secession as early as May 1966. This is what they said. We read it yesterday. It become crystal clear that the former leaders of the action group have, as predicted, joined forces with the former leaders of the NNDP in a renewed battle against Easterners. Recent events have further demonstrated that these leaders are clearly striving to counter the effort of the military regime to forge national unity. In this respect, the Western leaders are one with the Northern leaders, who are similarly opposed to a unitary system of government in Nigeria, and all of them are anxious that the country should revert to the old federal structure, which, as everyone knows, was the principal cause of most of the woes of the First Republic. That's what the Igbo intellectuals said. We're going to read more books, but what you're going to discover at the end of the day is that Igbo military officers, Igbo politicians, Igbo intellectuals, Igbo civil servants, Igbo commoners had one thing in common. The idea of unitary system or unitary decree, they favored it, and the military regime, they also favored it. And they even made a case for Ironsi. And they were happy when it was unifying, everything was unifying. Now, in the book, just before, painted a beautiful picture of what the scene would have looked like. So we're going to read that book now, and it's like drama, so you can imagine it. And then when we're done with it, we'll now go to Beckon to Serve to understand exactly what really happened. Then we'll try and break down the decrees from 1 to 34. Not everything, right? We're just going to look at what's cogent in each of the decrees and why all of those things led to what happened in May. Also, if you've noticed, both Anthony Enaoro and E. Ayodele have said that what actually led to the massacres of May 29, 1966 was actually the decrees and the actions of Igbos in the North. That has to be drummed into people's minds and ears. The Northerners did not kill Igbos because they killed Sardauna or because they had the first coup. The payback for that one was in July. The one you got in May was what happened between January and May. And today we're going to get into that as well. So before we go into all of those things, let's get into Motosho's book, Just Before Dawn. One second, please. What's that? Found it. So this is Just Before Dawn by Kole Omotosho. I think I should create a bridge between what we read and what we're about to read. And we've talked about it several times, the coup that happened on the 15th and the drama that happened on the 16th. I don't want to go into all of those things, but that's not this topic. So this topic is the decree, but I want to just create a short background for it. There was a little drama on the 16th of January. On the 15th, actually, on Saturday, lots of drama. Then Sunday, they finished the drama. Monday, they arrested Victor Banjo. So a lot of things happened. So I'm just going to mention some of those things. So what we know now is that there was a coup, and then some things happened. Some of the things that happened we'll read here, and then we'll go on to how Ironsi started talking his own thing. So let's get into this. Dr. Nwafor Orizu was the acting president of the country. When by the end of the day on Saturday, 15th January, there was no news as to the whereabouts of the Prime Minister, Orizu asked the ministers or what was left of the cabinet to choose an acting Prime Minister. So we talked about this before, and actually it was they who brought a person to become the Prime Minister after having reached out to the British. And the best books to read on that event would be Beckoned to Serve by Shehu Shagari and Sarah Akinjide's interview. How they brought Bukka Charima, and then the Igbos preferred to have Ozumba Mbadiwe, and the Northerners said no, NPC said no, and then by 16th of January on a Sunday, Ironsi calls the cabinet members, together, and one second, I want to find you something here. He called them together, and the whole building was surrounded by soldiers, and then he made this statement. Gentlemen, if I am to restore law and order, you will have to hand over the government over to me. The Attorney General looked alarmed, realizing that this was what was called a fait accompli. It will be only for a short time, Ironsi assured the gathering, until we can sort out the constitutional system of the country. Details, we've talked about it before, but let's continue. Essentially, he twisted them, threatened them, and got the power. Got the power. An expression of paradoxical relief found itself on the faces of the Northerners. At least now they could go home. At 11:50 p.m. that Sunday night, the acting president of the country, Dr. Nwafor Orizu, told the whole country that he had been advised by the Council of Ministers. They did not advise him to do it. But he said he had been advised by the Council of Ministers that they had unanimously agreed to hand over the government of the country to the armed forces because of the present circumstances. Before he made his speech, the Attorney General had advised him to appoint an acting Prime Minister for the time being. He had said it would never work. There has been a coup d'etat. We cannot pretend that the army does not want to rule the country. Who said that? Nwafor Orizu. As soon as the acting president had broadcast his message, there was a roll of drums, and the Supreme Commander of the Nigerian Army, Major General J.T.U. Aguiyi-Ironsi, assumed the dual office of head of the Federal Military Government and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. He announced the suspension of the Constitution as well as the offices of President and Prime Minister. There was really no need to plan for the taking over of the government in Benin and Enugu, since these were not seen as targets by the coup makers. Although the coup makers were not taking power from Kaduna to Enugu, they were definitely bent on taking power from Kaduna and ridding themselves of the allies of Kaduna in Ibadan. These were the targets they had. Power must be wrested from the hands of the NPC if the country was ever to make any headway in the modern world. If those who were supposed to modernize the country look back from their inspiration rather than looking forward to a westernized future, they must be taken out of the seat of power and replaced. But the plans of the coup makers were bedeviled by the problem of arms. Nwobosi was in the Abeokuta garrison, where there was no armory as yet. Approached Brigadier Malari, advised Emmanuel Fajina when Nwobosi came to see him in Lagos. Tell him that you need to have some form of artillery at Abeokuta and see what he has to say. When Captain Nwobosi approached Brigadier Malari, by the way, this story is going back and forth. Okay, so this happened before the coup, apparently. Why? Because they keep him Malari during the coup, When Captain Nwobosi approached Brigadier Malari, the brigadier was delighted to help. Now you are going to be real soldiers instead of mere academics in uniform. The brigadier then made arrangements for some form of armory to be created at Abeokuta so that the soldiers, most of whom were services arms of the armed forces, could find material with which to practice. Major Bieno was in charge of the armory, and he was to move over to Lagos from Abeokuta with arms on the day of the coup. I'll explain. He never showed up, and the whole plan fizzled out, and Ironsi picked up the pieces to form the first military government in the country. What are they saying here? Very quickly. What they're saying here is that originally there were no arms and ammunition in Abeokuta. They were in Lagos. And Ifajina had somehow found a way to reach Malari through Nwobosi. And so they got some weapons there for them to be practicing. And the person in charge was John Obieno, who people will tell you in some books, you see that Obiano was one of the people that quelled the coup and stopped everybody. No, it's not really true. Why? Because Obiano, just like Nwobosi, just like Bengbuli, just like Onwotego, were all told, right, that there was going to be a coup and they were going to be involved in it, and they were waiting for marching orders. And so he was supposed to help with the transport and with the and also was one that also eventually gave the what's it called now? Access to arms and ammunition to Onwobosi. But he did not go to Lagos as he was supposed to go, and then he turned around and said it was he changed his mind. Just rubbish. Let's go on. In spite of the fact that Ironsi was the head of state and commander of the armed forces, Ojukwu was the most important military officer after the coup d'etat of January 1966. He knew of the possibility of a coup, but he was not part of it for two or more reasons. He was part of the Zik plan during the constitutional crisis of December 1964, and so the majors did not wish to meet with him. Actually, they met with him. If you read Adewale Ademoyega's book, they met with him, but he was neither here nor there. And then when the thing, boiled over, he chose Ironsi's side and found a way to get Zogu to surrender. We're going to move very fast because I want us to get to what we're really here to discuss. Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu dominated the meetings of the Supreme Military Council with his speeches. They were rehearsed, they were informed, and they amused his colleagues to no end. He seemed to say enough for all of them to the extent that once he had spoken, nobody bothered to say anymore. He had a psychological advantage over everyone else. In a society that respected book knowledge, or at least the certification that goes with it, Ojukwu had been to Oxford. And if it was money that would command respect, his father was a millionaire knighted by the monarch of England at the suggestion of his friend and confidant, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Whenever he cared to open his mouth on whatever topic, others listened. And since it was every time and on every subject that Ojukwu gave his views, they listened to him a lot. His delivery was measured and graded according to the effect he wanted to make. Much of the play on words was lost on them, but the seriousness of the subject did not escape their attention. There were two important issues on the agenda of the Supreme Military Council that morning when the council gathered in Lagos. These were the issue of the invitation of civilians to participate with the military in the governance of the country and the consideration of a decree to unify the administration of the country, do away with the regions, and outlaw tribal societies and such other courts that had done havoc to the emergence of the nation state of Nigeria. So even this meeting that they're having in 1966, they had a plan to abolish the regions. They succeeded eventually, but we want to see the drama, how it played out. The meeting began at 10 a.m. in the cabinet building. The civil service auxiliaries got there before the military leaders and took their places on the sides of the long table where the leaders sat. They were in their various tailored suits, some smart and modern, others more like the elongated wings of penguins reaching to their heels and hugging their shoulders. Many others were in flowing agbada. A few minutes before 10, the military leaders came in all dressed in their uniforms. Major General Ironsi sat at one end of the table, while Commodore Way, in deference to his age, sat at one end of the table. He seemed to have carved out a role for himself in the government of the military by being the light-hearted voice that would reduce the heavy burden of rulership, and so he would take every opportunity to make a joke of an issue. Ojukwu sat on the right hand of Way, while Brigadier Ogundipe sat on his left-hand side. On the right of Ironsi was Asan Katsina, and on his left was George Kurubo. Adekunle Fajui sat between Asan Katsina and Ogundipe, while David Ejo sat next to Ojukwu. Gowon was between Kurubo and Ejo. They shuffled the papers before them, and Major General Ironsi opened the meeting simply. The issues are in front of you. Who will speak to them? For some time, no one offered to speak, so Ojukwu began to speak, slowly at first, then quickly but not loudly, piling one argument over another. There was silence in the chamber. We do not need civilians in this government. The civilians led this country to the brink of madness and ruin. They were corrupt and incorrigible, and they betrayed the country. Then came the military, never mind how they got into power. All over the country, there was jubilation, there was happiness, there was a new hope. All over the country, there was jubilation, there was happiness, there was a new hope and a new dawn. The army became the beacon of hope for a potentially great but politically betrayed country. We as soldiers have been given the duty to correct the wrongs in this society. By whom? Asked Hassan Katsina, coughing at the same time. Ojukwu always ignored interruptions as long as he could not find a fitting, short and sharp statement to put the interruptee in his place. He looked across from his notes to Hassan Katsina and, not finding words for his contempt, continued his speech. Hassan Katsina and Yakubu Gowon recognized that they could not completely determine the full implication of any of the political decisions they were helping to take. Always, they would need to consult people such as Sir Kashim Ibrahim about any decisions taken in this council. Adekunle Fajui and Brigadier Ogundipe were out of their depth in these political times and followed every item of the discussion of the council with interest and curiosity. Brigadier Ogundipe had a staff appointment, and so it did not have much to do with civilians. Adekunle Fajui had to steer as cleverly as possible between the warring political groups in the Western region, make friends with people outside of the group of politicians, and see what good he could do for the religion. Or for the region, I think he meant to write. That was why he listened to Ojukwu. He looked forward to his meeting with the young playwright, Wole Soyinka, later that day when he got back to Ibadan. As for Commodore Way, he seemed to have decided that his role was to placate these hot-blooded young military officers. He considered that he had no constituency as such, the way the others had. George Kurubu and David Ejo came from what would have been termed minority areas. And as far as they were concerned, the problems of the country had been caused and aggravated by the contention of the three main ethnic groups for the control of political power in the center. I want to rush to the part where they start talking about those deals. One second, please. I want to jump to where they talked about unification decree. What book am I reading from? I'm reading Just Before Dawn by Kole Motosho. Can you join conversation? That'll be much later. Let's continue. Let's read this. Let's just read the drama as we get it. We'll eventually get into the unification decree. I'm trying to do this because we'll get into some serious academic stuff, but let's do the one that looks like a drama first. The aim of the civilians and the aim of the military are not the same. True, soldiers were not trained to rule, but when the military has had to intervene in politics, their purpose has always been clear: to provide time for moral ideas to take root. I have gone through this before. Anyway, an army civilian government would not work. We'll give the others, Brigadier Ogundipe said. You're not trained to govern, but to protect the nation, sir. And these politicians are dissemblers, countered Ojukwu. But are civilians always politicians? Asked Adekunle Fajui, thinking of his new friend Wole Soyinka. If they are not politicians, what do they have over you that you wish to give them credit for? Rather disappointed that it was Fajui who was asking him that question. So how are we going to fulfill these wonderful sacred duties when we are not trained to rule and will not use people trained in politics? Asked Hassan Katsina. By having a clear objective, a correct objective of what we want to do, and then going on to do it. Have you ever heard of the military dictators of Latin America? Asked Commodore Way, smiling mischievously like a little boy who had discovered that the emperor had no clothes. Of course, sir, replied Ojukwu. Those are power-corrupting holders of absolute power. Who is to check you? Asked Gowon. I mean, any of us becoming like them. Gentlemen, can we discuss this issue first? If you want me to produce a manual of military power in these times, I can do that later. Spare us, shouted Katsina. What about civil servants? George Kurubu contributed. They remain as the instruments of carrying out orders. There was silence. Well, the head of state said, any more contributions? Nobody said anything. So no civilian in the Federal Executive Council then? Agreed? It was the head of state who presented the next item, the unification decree. This decree will provide us with a unified command conducive to military administrative arrangement, as we are used to. Another advantage of this unification decree is that we can then imaginatively, I'll take that again slowly. This is where we are going. It will provide us with a unified command conducive to a military administrative arrangement, as we are used to. Another advantage of this unification decree is that we can then imaginatively deploy and distribute the nation's talent and expertise in the same way as material and financial resources are being deployed and distributed for the common good of the country. I am not sure of that analogy, interrupted Hassan Katsina. Major General Ironsi looked at Ojukwu and then at Hassan Katsina. Ojukwu winked at the head of state as if to say, I'll deal with him. Hassan Katsina continued his interruption. Such deployment of people, once carried out, cannot be exhausted, unlike material and financial resources. Those so deployed will simply make it impossible for the deployment of the local talents when they are ready to be deployed, especially in the north. What is he saying here? At this point, I have to pause and explain. Ironsi is saying here that they're going to come up with this unity decree, and one of the advantages, according to him, of the decree would be the deployment of resources, including human resources, in different parts of the country. The same way you're going to deploy material resources, financial resources, you can also deploy human resources. Now, if you really understand what he's saying, he's talking about deploying Igbo resources. The human is Igbo. And you understand when we get to the book by Shehu Shagari. You so understand the fact that when people talk about Igbo coup, it's not because they're trying to be tribalistic, it's because this is exactly what happened. He said they were going to be deploying human resources across the country, right? And then Hassan Katsina said, listen, if you're going to be deploying human beings, that is not exhaustible. In other words, you always have people to deploy. So you can easily move people from the east to the north again and again, so that the local folks in the north do not have any space to fill, because they've been filled with several people being quote unquote deployed from other parts of Nigeria. So that was his own argument. And again, it makes sense because he was the regional governor of the north. Let's go on. It says here, such deployment of people once carried out cannot be exhausted, unlike material and financial resources. Those so deployed will simply make it impossible for the deployment of local talents when they are ready to be deployed, especially in the north. May I say, sir, cuts in Ojukwu, that the details of this decree may be decided later. I think what the head of state wants to present are the principles of the decree in the first place. If we accept the principle of the thing, then we can debate the details later. May I suggest that the head of state be allowed to finish his statement before we interrupt him, continued Commodore Way. The final reason for this unification decree is that by the development of the administrative, technical, and other personnel from one section of the country to the other, that's a development? Yes, okay. I think it's supposed to be deployment, but I wrote development, by the way. Let me just read again. The final reason for this unification is that by the deployment of the administrative, technical, and other personnel from one section of the country to the other, mutual understanding would have been enhanced, and a real sense and feeling of interdependence fostered among the different peoples of the land. What does that mean? Unity. That's the exact thing the lecturers from the East were saying in 1966. That what Ironsi was doing was going to forge national unity. Whenever people have conversations in the Nigerian political landscape and they use that word unity, beware. For the most part, the person talking is a very, very selfish and greedy person. Unity will sound like unity in diversity, it sounds nice. What it's saying basically is to deploy people from a place where there's little resources into places where you have more opportunities. And you can't say it's wrong because that will make you a tribalist. Are you not united? So he says the final reason for the unification decree is that by the deployment of the administrative, technical, and other personnel from one section of the country to the other, mutual understanding would have been enhanced and a real sense and feeling of interdependence fostered among the different peoples of this land. We must become one by force. On the contrary, interrupted Hassan Katsina, again on the contrary, such deployment would lead to confrontation. I remember my father telling me once of the reaction of one of the emirs to the suggestion from a British officer that southern district officers be posted to the north. The emir said something like, "We do not wish those who did not conquer us to rule over us." That was in the colonial period, countered Ojukwu. That feeling has not changed, whatever you may think, countered Hassan Katsina. I'm going to stop there for now, and I will go to the book by Shehu Shagari. This is what we just read is Just Before Dawn by Kole Omotosho. Now we're going to Beckon to Serve by Shehu Shagari. A number of key military and political appointments were retained his post of Chief of Staff, Supreme Headquarters, while Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon was made Chief of Army Staff. Commodore J.E.A. Way commanded the Navy while Lieutenant Colonel Kurubo led the Air Force. In the regions, Lieutenant Colonels Francis Adekunle Fajuyi, David Okpode Ejo, and Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu were made military governors for the West, Midwest, and East respectively, and Major Hassan Usman Katsina later promoted to Lieutenant Colonel for the North. All the appointments broadly reflected the configuration of ethnic and sectional groups in the country. But the ethnic composition of the mutineers and the selective nature of their murders were soon perceived as ethnically motivated. Of the 8 core conspirators, 7 were Igbo, while the remaining 1 was Yoruba. Save Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Onegbe, a Midwestern Igbo, 2 of the East and Midwest military officer or politician was eliminated. In fact, the eastern and midwestern capitals of Enugu and Benin City, respectively, were virtually untouched by the revolt. The fact that Ironsi was also an Igbo only served to reinforce the suspicions that he was sympathetic to the mutineers. The view was patently dubious, but it was nevertheless widely shared, particularly among Northerners, who pointed to the disproportionate loss of their most prominent political and military figures vis-a-vis other regions. It was thus easy for some people to read ethnic bias into the actions of the new regime, to suspect that Easterners, particularly the Igbo, were battening upon others. Regrettably, Ironsi himself did not help matters by surrounding himself with a battery of predominantly Igbo advisors, who formed themselves into not only a think tank, but a sort of kitchen cabinet as well. In 1965, his would-be British predecessor opposed his appointment as GOC, but was overruled by Sir Abubakar, much also to the disapproval of some leading NPC figures. I think I talked about this the other day when we were reading the British Archives document. The first choice for Webi Everard, in terms of successor, was Ogundipe. The second choice was Ademulegun. And interesting, I was reading earlier today, the first 4 was the number 1 officer, if I can use that word, the Nigerian army was actually not Ironsi, it was Basi. And I said in Akwa Ibom, there's a place in Akwa Ibom they call Wellington Basi, who was named for him, after him. He's from Corsiva. So it was Wellington Basi, Ironsi was number 2, then you had Ademulegun, you had Prophet Ogundipe and Malari, okay? But the Sardauna actually wanted Ademulegun, and that's because the GOC also wanted Ademulegun anyway. Webi also wanted Ademulegun. Sorry, Ogundipe, then Ademulegun. Ogundipe was away eventually at the time of the coup anyway. But here's the point that they're trying to make here is that if nobody say waiting happen, nobody himself will even be the one with the lead. But he had one thing that the others did not have. It was a major, and he became major because a major general because he had gone to Congo, and that was when he got that should I call it promotion. So let's continue reading here. Just want to add that bit to the reading. It says in 1965, his would-be British predecessor, Major General Webi Everard, opposed his appointment as GOC but was overruled by Sir Abubakar, much also to the disapproval of some leading NPC figures, including the Sardauna. Ironsi was, however, a courageous, if somewhat elusive soldier whose commitment to the military professional ethos seemed both strong and genuine. He was very much beholden to his advisors and unable or unwilling to descend the treacherous path which they wanted him to tread. These were clever men intent on fishing in troubled waters. On 21 February 1966, Ironsi elaborated on his regime's intentions in a major policy speech. Public affairs were to be conducted from the center to ensure control over, quote-unquote, all major areas of national activities and to plot a uniform pattern of development for the whole country. The first person who thought that Nigeria should not develop, that different regions in Nigeria should not develop at their own pace, the first person who said it and made it law was Ironsi. Let me say something I've said before, but I think it's important to say here. What the Northerners have done in Nigeria, it's really with power. It's been terrible. But here's the thing. They were students of a bigger group, or of a more, not bigger, just more vicious group. So when they learn the lesson, they can't know the work past the Oga. And the reason I'm saying this is not because the North doesn't do anything wrong. It's because we don't understand where it's coming from. So you hear people saying things like, oh, what's that thing we say? Quota candidates, quota this, quota that. And then we say, oh, somebody's holding us back and all of us cannot do what we're supposed to do. Let us go back to the Kinecon system. This was how they destroyed the original system. Does that mean that we should be blaming Ironsi for doing it? No. But we should not allow people to change Nigeria's history because it doesn't make them feel comfortable. Ironsi abolished the original system because as far as it's concerned, or as far as it was concerned, it was trying to create a thing where everybody would develop at the same pace, which makes absolute no sense. It makes no sense at all. But I don't blame him, Sha, because by the way, this was the first time in the history of certain folks that were getting involved in politics at a very high level. But let's continue reading. All major, on 21 February 1966, Ironsi elaborated on his regime's intentions in a major policy speech. Public affairs were to be conducted from the center to ensure control over all major areas of national activities and to plot a uniform pattern of development for the whole country. Though there would be no room for sectional and ethnic concerns. We are one Nigeria. The infamous politics of civilian politicians. If all this sounded vaguely agreeable, Northern elite saw it as a mere ploy to foster Igbo dominance. That's the word again. That's the phrase again. We've read 4 books, and I assure you, that phrase is present in all 4 books. I read it in 3. It was in the other page of the 3rd book I read. What's in the book? Okay, let's go on. If all this sounded vaguely agreeable, Northern elites saw it as a mere ploy to foster Igbo dominance and control over state power, resources, jobs, and patronage. Isolated from the hub of state power, they were inclined to see the consequences of such deprivation as all too frightening. Their fears were also widely shared by other non-Igbo elites, particularly within official circles, where there now developed weak channels of political communication and control among the soldiers, police, and civil servants, who mainly composed the regime. And to the latter was added the insulation of the regime from outside political demands, made worse by the regime's own assumptions. People were prone to believe the worst, especially given the sorts of rumors that were emanating from military, police, and civil service circles. Such confidence-building measures as were undertaken were feeble and limited, and at any rate, undermined by the particularly defective channels of communication between the center and the regions. Politics, political parties, and politicians were attacked by the regime, often to the cheers of a sectional and self-righteous media and even some intellectuals. We read about those intellectuals earlier, B. Parties and politicians themselves were harassed to refrain from activity, while trade unions and ethnic associations were warned to keep out of politics. Now I want to get to the many decrees that Ironsi passed. Let's start with decree number 1. So I'm reading different books just to put things together. So here's the very first decree that Ironsi promulgated. So I'll be going from one book to the other. Just stay with me. Right now I want to read Crisis and Conflict in Nigeria. So it says here, although decree number 1 promulgating the suspension and modification of the constitution was retroactive to 17th January, it was not signed by Ironsi till 4th March. In lay terms, it legalized the policies adumbrated in the general's first broadcast. Ironically, it was in Kaduna, the primary bastion of the Kinecon. The point is that we're going through the decrees. So first, we have decree number 1, which was signed on the 4th of March, but was retroactive to 17th January. So that means that they suspended everything that had to do with the government the way it was at the time, very quickly. Like I said, we're not talking about all the decrees. We're just talking about some of them here and there. That decree formally suspended the part of the 1963 Constitution relating to the offices of the President, Prime Minister, and Parliament. It vested executive authority in the head of the federal military government, giving him the power to make laws through decrees. I want to I want to call your attention to a particular word here. I think it's going to help us appreciate what we did on Wednesday, decree number 8. Just pay attention, please. Decree number 1 vested executive authority in the head of the federal military government, giving him the power to make laws through decrees. In other words, it was the supreme commander, so he gave him the power to make laws. This is different from decree number 8, where Gowon was saying that the power to make laws, the executive powers and also the legislative powers will not be residing in him, but in the SMC, Supreme Military Council, where all the regional governors will have veto and they could say no to whatever I had to say. 2 of them have to agree on any matter for it to be a decree. It's different from decree number 1 of Ironsi. So when you think about it, decree number 8 of March 17, 1967 actually gave you something even better than what the 1963 Constitution gave you before Ironsi came around in 66. Ojukwu rejected decree number 8, by the way, but let's continue. Decree number 33 outlawed, this one was promulgated in May. Decree number 33 outlawed 81 political parties and groups, along with 26 of the most prominent ethnic associations on the whole. I'll take that again. In May 1966, Decree number 33 outlawed 81 political parties and groups, along with 26 of the most prominent ethnic associations. On the whole, though, only few politicians were detained, the most noticeable being 15 SWAL NNDP grandees in the Western region. Similarly, few politicians along with some officials in the Eastern, Midwestern, and Western regions were prosecuted for offenses like official corruption, stealing, fraud, or conspiracy. But the overall approach was tardy and piecemeal. In the North, probes into the affairs of the Northern Nigeria Development Corporation, Northern Nigeria Marketing Board, and the Northern Nigeria Housing Corporation were instituted in mid-February 1966. Here again, the government differed over proceeding against individuals. Here again, the government differed over proceeding against individuals indicted by the inquiries, perhaps to avoid worsening the mounting discontent in the region. We're going to jump to the next paragraph. Don't worry, we'll tie everything together. We're just reading. We're reading a lot of books. We're going to tie everything together eventually. The federal government eventually followed in June. It set up tribunals to investigate the Electricity Corporation of Nigeria, the Nigerian Railway Corporation, and the Lagos City Council, and passed a comprehensive decree enabling it to probe and recover any assets that had been improperly acquired in public office. But the bulk of the measures centered not on structural reforms, but on changes of personnel, as in the removal of all political appointees from the boards of federal and regional government parastatals and from university councils. In the East, Midwest, and the West, local government councils and management committees were replaced with sole administrators. And in the West, where the changes were more extensive, alterations were also made in the grading and judicial competence of its customary court system. Unlike in the South, the emphasis of the reforms in the North was structural. Accordingly, the changes were more profound because they struck at the core of local power, control, and influence, which the traditional and modern Northern power elite greatly depended. Remember this when we get to what happened in May. We're trying to build up to May 29, and what led to what happened in May, on May 29 actually has to do with the decrees that Ironsi was promulgating. We're trying to build up to May 29, and what led to what happened in May, we're trying to build up to May 29, and what led to what happened on May 29 actually has to do with the decrees that Ironsi was promulgating. The reforms, first outlined in February 1966, brought about the integration of the Native Authority Police, courts, and prisons with the Nigerian Police Force, the judiciary, and the Federal Prison Service, respectively. These were in addition to the corrective measures which swept aside the erstwhile native authority councils and management committees together with their personnel. Along with all this, the regime assumed draconian powers like several state security, detention of persons decrees, and the suppression of disorder decree number 4 of 1966. Such decrees provided for individuals to be detained without trial, to be tried by military tribunals, to face long jail sentences, or even the death penalty for public order offenses, and for the government to declare martial law in areas threatened by disorder. Although martial law was not proclaimed in any area and the regime was hesitant to clamp ruthlessly on its opponents, the decrees, like some of the regime's corrective measures, nevertheless induced a climate of fear and uncertainties. Politically, they increasingly rid the regime of the apparent veneer of legitimacy which greeted its advent. In other words, when this first started, people were okay with the fact that there was change, but the decree started making them feel like there's something was up, and something was really up. So he's saying that the decrees made people start getting very afraid. It was inducing a climate of fear and uncertainties, and also increasingly it rid the regime of the apparent veneer of legitimacy which greeted its advent. So people didn't really consider it to be legitimate any longer. We're going to jump now to page 126 if you have the book. So I'm going to, like I said, we're not going to read all the decrees. So we'll talk about decree 1, decree 33, decree 4. We're going to round everything up with decree 34. Throughout the Ẹkáàbọ period, I was alternatively living in Shagari village, tending my farm, and in Sokoto as a native authority councillor without portfolio, a post I had attained while on leave without pay. I was also on the consultative committee of the Northern Leaders of Thought, an informal grouping of civilians nominated by the military regime for advisory purposes. This apart, I had no other direct or indirect contact with government, neither did I seek to establish any. My first meeting with the military authorities was on 7th March 1966. After Lieutenant Colonel Hassan Katsina, the Northern Military Governor, invited some leaders of the banned NPC to Kaduna over the issue of NPC funds. Governor Hassan Katsina said he had received presentation or representation from some former NPC legislators that they could not repay the loans, which they owed to and were being demanded by the government. Accordingly, they suggested that part of NPC funds should be used to offset the debts since the funds had not yet been frozen. Lieutenant Colonel Hassan Katsina thought it was a good idea and demanded to know the balance of the party's funds. Alhaji Aliyu Makamambida, who was the NPC treasurer, promised to furnish the governor with the balance sheets of the party's accounts, as he alone among us possessed the information. He, however, pointed out with characteristic candor that it would be wrong in principle to use any NPC money to offset the former legislators' debts. Where were we going? In the meantime, another issue had cropped up on my return to Sokoto. Major General Ẹkáàbọ invited the Sultan, Sir Abubakar III, to Lagos for consultation. The Sultan consulted his traditional cabinet. We reasoned that acceptance of the invitation might be misconstrued as a tacit support for Ẹkáàbọ's increasingly disagreeable conduct of public affairs. Accordingly, we advised the Sultan to convey an explanation disobliging the request. A man of wide sympathies, the Sultan rejected our conclusion, recalling that he had once visited Lagos, February 1945, at the instance of Sir Arthur Richards, the British colonial governor. So he was even more inclined to accept the same invitation from a Nigerian head of state. It was a day-long visit on 12 March 1966, during which the Sultan delivered a reassuring message or reassuring speech to troops, many of them Northerners. Major General Ẹkáàbọ was happy to have the Sultan in Lagos, for he was trying to stem the gathering tide of northern discontent. But Ẹkáàbọ's task was not helped by the behavior of Igbo residents in the north. Since his assuming power, many of them had been loudly proclaiming the regime to be theirs and even making a virtue of the January coup killings. This attitude quickly spread from offices and public institutions to places like model terminals and markets. Some Igbo shopkeepers even took to displaying large-sized photographs which depicted Major Nzogu standing beside the body of the slain Sir Ahmadu Bello, the former Northern Premier. Igbo people would draw the attention of the Northerners to the photographs and say of Nzogu, Shina Maganinku. In Hausa, he is the one who can knock sense into you. Some Igbo also took to public playing of a gramophone record called Machine Gun, whose celebratory lyrics of the January killings were interspersed with the sound of gunshots. Such unwarranted provocation naturally exacerbated the ease between Northerners and the Igbo. The pulse of Northern grassroots disquiet was reflected in the vernacular press. On 28 March 1966, Gaskia Tafikwabo ran a trenchant editorial calling for the insolent behavior of the Igbo residing in the north to be curbed. Meanwhile, Ironsi seemed intent on pursuing his declared goal of establishing a unitary state. 3 national study groups were set up in mid-March to deliberate on matters regarding national unity. Guys, you know, that phrase, I have a, should I call it PTSD? Whenever I say unity, national unity, I know that I lie. But let's continue. I'd like national unity, it's just that Nigeria is not that nation. People should, and then we cannot talk about the one for the country. But no, they will not have unity at all. They will be shouting national unity. Anyway, let's read. Meanwhile, Ironsi seemed intent on pursuing his declared goal of establishing a unitary state. 3 national study groups were set up in mid-March to deliberate on matters regarding national unity, a proposed constitution, and the development of a national economy. So there are 3 study groups set up. Ironsi also appointed one of his Igbo intimates, Mr. Francis C. Nwokedi, to report as a one-man commission of inquiry on the formation of an administrative machinery for a united Nigeria and the unification of 5 public services and judicial services. The appointment raised some hackles given the committee's sole membership and its tendentious terms of reference, which excluded federalism. All the more so because the matter centered on regional autonomy and control over state decisions, jobs, patronage, and the instrument of judicial power. Although one non-Igbo person was later asked to join Nwokedi, the damage had been done. The few Northerners on the various study groups also felt they were being manipulated. Where were we? So he has mentioned, the reason I'm just reading and not stopping is because I've explained many of these things before. We are going somewhere. So we're just going, that's why I'm not stopping to explain anything, because we've done, for instance, you remember we've dealt with that Chinema Ganeku thing several times. We even played one of the songs here, the one by Rex Lawson, Ewu Nabakwa. There were 2 songs that were very popular between January and May of 1966. Ewu Nabakwa by Rex Lawson, Machine Gun by Celestine Uku. And they taunted Northerners with those songs, right? And they also claimed the regime to be theirs. Okay? And we've seen that in the last 1 hour, we've seen that in a number of books. But if you really want to, if you are looking for other sources, again, what now? It is to Serve by Shehu Shagari. It's in Crisis and Conflicts in Nigeria by H.M. Green. It's in Tragedy of Victory by Gordon Labi Sama. It's in The Origin of Nigerian Civil War by Nnamdi Azikiwe. Everybody talks about this thing. Even Ademega mentioned it, how Igbos and NCNC dominated Ironsi's cabinet and policies. But I don't want to stay on that because we're going to May 29. So let's keep going. The few Northerners on the very manipulated, while Northern civil servants in general became increasingly edgy over the trend of affairs. Their fears that the regime had irreversibly committed itself to unitary government, regardless of whatever the various commissions recommended, were confirmed by Major General Ironsi's budget broadcast of 31st March. And this is what he said. He boldly asserted, "I am convinced that the bulk of our people want a united Nigeria, and that they want in future one government and not a multitude of governments." How else does a person prepare you for abolishing the regional system, if not by saying this in March? That Nigerians would want a united Nigeria. I've said this several times. I don't like it. I almost said I don't like when I hear folks from the East say they want a united Nigeria. Because I've read Azikiwe say it, I've read Ironsi say it, I've read Ojukwu say it, and the three of them, are not individuals. They are representative of a culture. They are representatives of a culture. And so I don't believe in that kind of unity. Just to put it out there, I don't believe in the unity that erases who I am. It's not unity, it's uniformity. What you want is everybody forget what makes you unique and let's build something new. The only group that will say that is a group that has nothing unique about them that's actually of worth. If you have anything in your history or in your culture that is of value, you wouldn't want to jettison it in order to just create something new with people that are just emerging. So to think of a unitary system, by the way, it is not an Ironsi project. It was, again, I'm not trying to insult anything, but it was an Igbo project. You know what? Let me read something to you. I'm coming back to this book in a bit. Let me read something to you from Ademoyega, because I know people would think sometimes like, why are you, I'm not fighting any ethnic group. It's just that I don't like to be gaslighted. Like people just go around talking rubbish. Where is that thing? Let me find it for you. This is Adewale Ademoyega, why we struck. Listen to him more. Another important point was that we removed the politicians because we were convinced. These were the revolutionaries, right? We removed the politicians because we were convinced that they were evil. We did not favor any side. Actually, they did. He just didn't know because they were using him. That's what you do to Yoruba bots. It is what it is. They were willing tools. He was a willing tool, just like many of them on Twitter and TikTok and in Nigeria today, shouting, hey, one Nigeria. I believe in one Nigeria, by the way, but a properly structured country, not forced unity. Let's get back to this. Another important point was that we removed the politicians because we were convinced that they were evil. We did not favor any side. You did. We did not seek to wear the garb of any political party. This we knew for sure. Ironsi, on the other hand, surrounded himself with a particular tribe and chose the political policies of a particular party. That tribe was the Igbo and the party was the NCNC. He could not see that this kind of situation called for the balancing of ideas, principles, and personalities. Again, the advice I always give when I read this book, if you are Igbo, don't recommend this book to anybody. They recommended this book since 1981 when it was published. I think it was published in 81. Was it 81? Yes. Since 81, they've been recommending the book. They've never read it. If you read it, you will never recommend it because it doesn't make you look good. But the point I'm trying to make is that even from this book, you see what they're saying here. The policies that Ironsi was pushing, they were not just something that they came up with, right? This was a plan that has been set in motion since 44, and we talked about it a number of times. If you don't understand what 1944 means, just listen to Igbo 20-year plan for Nigeria. It's a three-part video on our YouTube channel, Busuri Oris. There was a plan to perpetually rule Nigeria, okay? And by 1951, the idea was to have a unitary system in this country. And although Azikiwe had talked about having a federal system in 1943 with his book that he published, and he called it The Political Blueprint for Nigeria. By 1951, he had changed his mind. By the way, Azikiwe vacillated more than any politician in Nigerian history as far as the top level guys were concerned. Azikiwe was the most unstable. You couldn't hold him to anything. He will say this today, tomorrow it will change. That's why we respect him and thank God for the 500 naira note. But all this father of nation is a lie. With all due respect, there was no, it wasn't constant, right? It always vacillated, right? So one day you are this, then the other day you are this. So it was federal, then it went to unitary, then it went back to federal. But the ideology that he kept pushing was eventually passed 15 years after they started talking about it in Nigeria in 1951. By 1966, Ironsi was pushing an ideology that was introduced by the NCNC guys. Someone on TikTok, the same as Obi of today. Yes, when Obi said a new Nigeria is possible, sincerely, every time I hear the word new Nigeria, you know what I think about? New Africa. Zik had New Africa. I don't know why everything looks like deja vu. Zik had New Africa when he returned in 1937, was talking everywhere about New Africa, New Africa. New Africa is possible. Well, he didn't use possible, but was talking about New Africa, Renaissance Africa, where all of us will have no tribes and ethnic identities. All of us will be one Africa. That was in 1937. Actually published a book in 1934 The book is titled Renaissance Africa. And then I started talking about it in 1937 until he wanted to destroy Nigeria with his terrible idea. Chief Adelo Dutola said something quite interesting. He said that he should take the New Africa back to America where he brought it, because until that thing is out of Nigeria's political discourse, there will be no harmony in the country. And he was right. That same mindset is what you see when people are shouting unity, unity, unity. The unity that allows you to take advantage of what belongs to other people is not unity, it's stealing. You're not uniting with anybody. And let me not rush ahead of myself. Once we read this Q34, I'll explain everything where I want to talk. There's a reason I want to just continue reading. But I say all of that to say that I don't believe in any word, anything about unity from the Southeast is not true. And it's not because they are bad people. It's just that culturally, the definition of unity is defective. So, and I have to make that very clear. It's not that the person, I'm saying people are bad, when ethnicity is terrible. That's not the point. The point is you have to understand the culture of the people. And one of the mistakes that Yoruba people make is that we assume that everybody is like us, especially folks from the Southeast. And our fathers made that mistake. Awo even made the mistake. Awo knew he was wrong, but Awo still did it. Awo did it because I would rather choose the East over the North. Big mistake. And I'm not saying the North is better, but they have, see, it's not about good or bad. It's not about better or worse. It's about understanding who this person is and knowing what you can bear. And if feudalism was the main issue, I would rather have that than a group that will spend their lifetime just gaslighting the entire country and shouting unity and tribalism all over the place. Anyway, let's go on. Someone asks here, was there any Eastern Region NCNC probe? There was Foster Sutton Tribunal, but it was actually to inquire into Zeke's misappropriation of Eastern Region money. And yes, they found that he stole money. This two could not serve, it's just Akmalini. He stole money, £877,000. If there's another one, I don't know if there's another one, but that one I'm very sure of. We'll come back to that later. Let's go on with this. Something about unity? Yeah. So Major General Ross's budget broadcast of 31st March, where he boldly asserted, quote, I am convinced that the bulk of our people want a united Nigeria, and that they want in future one government and not a multitude of governments. One Africa unitary system. On the latter view, Ironsi was mistaken. By the way, I have to pause. What he just said there right now is not very different. The mindset is not different from Azikiwe's 1949 speech, where he said the God of Africa has specially created the Igbo nation to lead the children of Africa from the bondage of the ages. So apparently, we're going to become one. Have just one, but that one will be led by another one. But that particular one that will be leading us is a special one. And to say that group is not special or better than another group, it makes you a tribalist and a bigot. Are you a bigot or a you-got? Think about it. Let's read now. Okay. On the latter view, Ironsi was mistaken. Henceforth, northern criticism of the regime became more strident, pervasive, and uncompromising. Yet, the regime surprisingly appeared impervious, even encouraged to press on. In May, Ironsi indicated that jobs, listen to this, Ironsi indicated that jobs and land anywhere in the country would be available to any Nigerian. And look, I'm looking for one person that will tell me the difference between this particular statement I just read and the indigenous bill that was pushed last year. That's why I say that we have these conversations not because you're trying to say one group is bad or whatever. It's because whatever happened is happening. And if you don't do something about it, it's going to happen again. By the way, remember there was no Land Use Act in 1966. So that was, Land Use Act came in 78 with Obasanjo. All those things about, the land is held in trust by the governor of the state, all that English. That one was 78. This is 66. He's saying that jobs and lands anywhere in the country will be available to any Nigerian. Now, if you are a very naive Yoruba person, and we have a lot of us who are like that, in your mind you think, yes, now that's one Nigeria, that's good, that's one country where we should. You don't understand nothing. It's not about one country. And I'll explain this way. I think it's a very good point. We'll come back to this book. I have to begin to explain little by little now. I'll use another book to explain. Let me use another book to explain so that I will say it together. Don't be naive. Educated elites in Nigerian society. I'm going to read something that Ojukwu did. You see, from every generation, you see this thing happening over and over again. You just have to observe the pattern. That's all. And then you understand what's happening. And it's also different from what you have now. All right, listen to this. Please pay attention, please. The Easterners did their best to teach the rest of the country how to get above the sentiment of tribalism. Let's read. Again, this book is called The Educated Elites in Nigerian Society by Daly. The Easterners did their best to teach the rest of the country how to get above the sentiment of tribalism. Hence, in the early months of 1966, scholarships were thrown open to all Nigerians living in the region. Good idea, Abi, which you understand soon. Moreover, the government of Odumegwu Ojukwu expunged from all government forms the requirement of stating one's tribal origin in application for employment, scholarships, and so on. In other words, the curse of tribalism had been removed from the region, and all Nigerians in the East were to be treated as equal with equal opportunities. Let's put our hands together for the Lord. Wait, but rather than appreciate the high values and virtues which the Easterners were inculcating, it is clear from the lack of reciprocity on the part of other leaders, military and civil, in the country, that the East is wasting its resources in trying to achieve the impossible. As a matter of fact, these gestures made by the East have been widely interpreted in other parts of the country as evidence of its ardent desire for national unity, which the others do not really want. Let me tell you what the Torrent I just read. Ojukwu had this brilliant idea that we're going to give people, scholarships, right? And that if you want to fill your form, you don't have to say I'm Yoruba. So don't write your ethnicity there. This is one Nigeria. That's why you hear the leaders today, even professors, talking about Rwanda. 160s. Oh, there's no tribe. I don't like the word tribe, but you get the point. I prefer ethnic nationality. But so there's nothing like, no identity that makes you different. We're all Nigerians. So when you want to fill that form, right, you want a scholarship in the Eastern region, you don't have to say you're Yoruba. Just mention your name. But here are the questions. Number one, the fact that I do not tick that tribal or ethnic box, does that change the fact that my name is Adebusui? Are you saying you will not know where I'm from when I say Adebusui? Are you joking? That you not know that Ibako is from the north and Anade is Yoruba? You will not know. Okay. Let's assume that you say regardless, you are colorblind or you are ethnic blind. Okay. Here's the real question. Number two. Why did you stop that policy? Why? You started this policy, Abi. Why did you stop that policy? The answer is inside what I just read. Due to lack of reciprocity from other regions, you stopped it. What does that tell me? It tells me that you are coming out with that policy because of reciprocity. What's the meaning of this Turenchi? If you are Awo and you want to start free education for all kids, and this is what Papa did, by the way, free education for all children, Yoruba or non-Yoruba, even, Westerner or non-Westerner, even if you're not from the Western region, you will get education if you live in the Western region. He did not do that to wait for the North or the East to reciprocate for Yoruba people living in the North or the East. He just did it to develop his own region. My people must be educated. These children have to be educated. And thank God he did it in 1955. Thank God. That's why we're like this. He took his time, himself and his team, created a policy, they pushed it, and here we are. Whether you did it in the North or not, whether or not you did it in the East, the policy will still stand in the West, because the policy was for his people. It had nothing to do with you. Your children might come live in Yoruba land or different parts of the Western region, and they'll still get the same education or the same free education. That's okay. Now imagine I was saying that, I have noticed that there's no free education. And by the way, there was no free education in the East. They tried it. It ended that same year. Tried around late 50s. It was Zik that was trying it. There was no organization. It's not today's topic. They tried to do it. They could not. Organization was poor. And so they stopped it. So imagine after they now stopped it in the East, Awo will now say, Zig did not have this free education in the East that I have in the West. Therefore, we're going to stop the one in the West. That would be a stupid idea. And I thank God that Papa was not stupid. When people tell you things like, we are cancelling a policy because of lack of reciprocity, it tells you the real reason for the policy. And I'll explain. How many Yoruba people moved to the East and how many Easterners moved to Yoruba land? How many Northerners moved to the East and how many Easterners moved to the North? It is not that Yoruba people don't go to the East or Northerners don't go to the East, but when you look at the volume, more Easterners move out, and they've been doing that since around early 1900. And that's why you notice that many of the leaders in the First Republic from the East were born outside the region. And we've explained why that happened. It happened because there was land hunger, right? There's land hunger in the East. Even today, it's still there. It's not like, and it's not a jab. It's just the reality. The entire southeastern states, the entire region, is about the size of your state. Think about it for a second. Maybe people don't really understand what this is. Imagine having millions and millions and millions of people packed into that place. It's the most densely populated part of Nigeria. The eastern region is the most densely, it has always been like that. And I've read Majiparam's statement in the list now, 20th October 1960, when he talked about the fact that they were pouring out of the overcrowded forest. Again, it's not an insult. It's just what it is. It's like saying that you have mangrove forest. It's just what it is, right? It's like we have mangrove forest, we have savanna, we have anyway. It is, we're not comparing. The point is, it's just descriptive. They poured out, right? So in pouring out, they just move into different places. So you move into the south, you move into the west, you move into the north, you move everywhere to try to find opportunities, which is okay because you're Nigerians. Until you begin to tell us that you could not develop jack. You could not develop nothing. All right. So, but they had to move, which is brilliant because, of course, you're Nigerians and you didn't develop anywhere. But here's the crazy part. If I am the governor of the people that move out a lot, let's say, for instance, on a scale of 100, 70% of my people live, right, even today, maybe be like I said, I just make things up. I think it was it last year or 2 years ago? Last year, Governor Soludo of Anambra State said in 2025, 50% of his own people, of his indigenous, live outside the state. Again, it is not a jab. It's not a recent event. It's a trend. It's a historical trend. You can see the data. If you want it, we can bring it out. So what you notice is that, let's say between 50 and 70% of the people live outside your region. Southwest, people live outside too. So let's say 30%. Some in the north, some in the east. The north, let's say 40% live outside the north. So what you discover is that your people move out more or out of your region into other people's spaces than other people move into your region. You then grant them scholarship without tribal identity. if you're a good person, if you're a good person and you actually have the interests of Nigeria at heart and you want to destroy tribalism according to your own definition, you will continue doing it. For long. But because you are doing it so that folks in the north will be able to have opportunity just like the indigenous of that place and say we have removed tribalism, no identity. We can have the same scholarships that folks in the north are having. We can go to the west and demand the same thing because after all, we're doing it in our own region. So why can't we have the same thing? That's the reason for the policy in the first place. It wasn't about what was going to happen in the east. It was about what was going to happen in other parts of Nigeria to Easterners, particularly Igbos. Yeah, from my perspective, is that if you will stop the policy due to lack of reciprocity, it tells you that the policy was never really because of development or anything. It was because of reciprocity. It created it for it to be reciprocated. When you don't reciprocate it, he stopped it. The purpose of that law was reciprocity, not unity. Think, oh, let us be one Nigeria. For what purpose? For the most part, is to take advantage of what belongs to other people. That's the basis for the unitary system. That's the basis for the indigenous bill that thankfully will never come out again. That was destroyed, or just parked to one side last year. You live in a place after 10 years, you're an indigene. What does that mean? These conversations, although they're historical, they actually point us to what's happening today. And if we can just calm down and understand that it's a cultural issue, the culture hasn't changed because the people choose not to evolve, then you can have that conversations at that level rather than saying your father, your mother. The point is that there's a cultural issue at work here, and in a place where you have several cultures and different realities and different value systems, you must have a federal system. So about to 66, and regardless of the differences that we had, Ironsi gave us a unitary system, and whether we agree or not, we are still practicing that thing. And that system is what makes us not to be able to have any conversation without using the word unity. It's not because we even understand unity. I dare say most Nigerians don't even know what the word unity means. We just say it. And we say it because of what Ironsi did. When we were having true federalism, were we not united? Well, we're just starting out. It was about 5 years of experiment, and then we scattered everything. But they were on the way to it. Let me tell you what Igbo lecturers said in 1966. I read this earlier. This is what intellectuals from the Eastern region, this is what they said. So again, it's a cultural thing. It's not like somebody is bad, somebody is good. It's the value system. And it's a value system born out of scarcity. You see, your reality usually determines your value system for the most part. If you're coming from a place where there's lack, and you now go to a place where there is plenty, if you are not careful, if you're a greedy, selfish person, what you will be thinking is how to divert the plenty in that place to your own area where there's lack, which is what unitary system was about. It had nothing to do with the unity of Nigeria. It was about diverting, and it's right there. Just in case you didn't hear when I read it, I'm coming back to this. I'm opening many books at the same time. Let me read something to you I'll come back to this from Kole Motosho. It had nothing to do with unity. That's why you have to be very careful with words. When people use words like marginalization, victimhood, unity, what does it mean? Let me read something to you from what we read earlier between Asan Katsina and Ironsi. Ironsi says, the final reason for this unification decree is that by the deployment of the administrative, technical, in fact, let me read the first part. It says here, this decree, that's the unitary decree, this decree will provide us with a unified command conducive to military administrative arrangement as we are used to. Another advantage of this unification decree is that we can then imaginatively deploy and distribute the nation's talent and expertise in the same way as material and financial resources are being deployed and distributed for the common good in the country. Excuse me. In the same way, material and financial resources are being deployed and distributed for the common good of the country. So we can make money from one place and share it amongst everybody. Okay, we can also pick people from one place and move them to another place. And you have to agree because you believe in unity. Are you not one Nigeria? If you say no, you're a tribalist. Okay. So it says here, such deployment. Okay, so Asan Katina said such deployment of people once carried out cannot be exhausted and so on and so forth. So let me read the other thing that Ironsi said. The final reason for this unification decree is that by the deployment of the administrative, technical, and other personnel from one section of the country to the other, mutual understanding would have been enhanced and a real sense and feeling of interdependence fostered among the different peoples of this land. Once we're able to move people, so for instance now, there are no opportunities in my hometown. So once we are one, I can deploy, you use words like you think that people are stupid. I can deploy people from my town to yours, where you have plenty. And since we are united, you have to allow my people work in your place now. So they'll take the opportunities. Then you now say, you counter. This is what Asan Katina now counter by saying, when you bring those people in, what happens to the local manpower, the people of the land themselves? What happens to them? This is why I hate it. I don't like it, but I really hate the idea when people say things like remove state of origin, particularly if you are from a minority ethnic group. The only buffer between you and certain overbearing ethnic groups is state of origin. Remove it, you are gone. It's the same thing as indigenous bill. So I move into your place. I bring my people, we are many. And they'll become indigenous after staying for a few years. And by the way, there's no state of origin, so we're all the same. When is your time to appoint your king? You think you will appoint that king? How? You say you have traditional system of doing it. Traditional what? Are we not the same? Are we not united? This is not one Nigeria. How will you choose a king that you not invite my own people and will not vote? Say, oh, there's a way we do it in tradition. Forget tradition. This is 2026. We have to vote. Everything has to be democratic. We have to vote. Forget all this, you're carrying oracle around. Drop oracle. And that's the funny thing. The person coming into your space is the one that will change the order of things. And you cannot say no because are you a tribalist? That's when they use that word and say you're a bigot, you're a tribalist. Don't feel offended. It's just a clown, very funny human being talking for the most part. They don't know what you're saying. And that's why people say things like, let him just remove the state of origin so we can all be one and just be state of residence. I even saw one of our own fathers say it, and I felt sad. There's a particular age you get to where you can't just be saying some things. So what that means basically is that all this indigenous rights. Oh, this particular state, I'm from Delta State, for instance, is an oil-producing state. We have 30% derivation, and so there are certain things I get because I'm from Delta State. Why should you get it if you are all one Nigeria? You can't get any special treatment. Say I'm Isoko, and let me finish that one. Say I'm from Delta State, I have to collect Kiniko because I'm from Delta State. No, you're not from any Delta State. We're all from Nigeria. If I live in that place, I have the same rights as a Isoko person or Robo person or Shekiri person in that same place. Then you come around and say something like, our land, there's a way we want to do it here. No. You cannot determine how you're going to do your land, because we have to do a law that will make things fair. It has to be fair towards all of us. It's fairness and justice and fairness. This thing you are doing is too much to your own side. You're not thinking of others. The person speaking English in their own home, everywhere is guarded, well protected. You don't just go around and talk about land anywhere. They will send you to your maker. But this in other places you can tell them about how, because you don't want to go to that place, not because there's demon there or anything, but because if people are leaving a particular place for lack of opportunities, why would you move into that place to prove unity? You have to be retarded. In other words, this person is coming from point A to point B, C, D, E, F because B, C, D, E, F have more than them. And it's a normal thing. Again, it's not, we Yoruba people, we also go to the UK because for the most part, the system is better than Yoruba land. So everybody migrates. It's not a jab. People usually go where you have more opportunities, which is why sensible people don't get to England and say to them that we developed London. That would be stupid. But we hear a lot of it in Nigeria because it's stupid. Anyway, the point is, when you move from A to B, C, D, E, F, and you have opportunities there, and you now become an indigene of that place. Now, people in B, C, D, E, F don't want to come to A, not because they hate A, but because if A had everything that B, C, D, E, F had, folks from A would not be moving to B, C, D, E, F in the first place. Which means that this guy, this Sadiq guy, this very smart guy, by the way, Ogbon Sadiq is from Islang. You will now move from A, go and fight B, C, D, E, F for what they possess in the name of national unity, and then go back to your point A and hold on to what you have because nobody wants to come and take it from you. You just feel like, what do we have? We don't really have anything. It's very small. There's no opportunities here now. You know now. It's not. I'm not even lying. They'll gaslight your life. You'll be there. You now be asking yourself, wait, though. Am I a tribalist? You know, people. Somebody said something on Twitter last week. They were asking themselves if she was not a tribalist. I'm like, they'll gaslight you. You would doubt your sanity. That's the idea of unitary system. It had nothing to do with unity. It was about two things: stealing that will be based on uniformity. And that idea of unitary system is not unity, it is uniformity. And uniformity thrives on erasure. In other words, if I want to create a uniform idea or uniform people, so to speak, what I do is that I remove everything that makes each person or each group unique. That's why when we go to school, we have to appear in a certain way. We all look alike. If they had their way, they'll make us the same height. In some schools, they will tell all the girls to shave their head. They want everybody to look a certain way. There's nothing, it's not like, oh, me, I like to paint my fingernails. Not here. You have to look like everybody else. So what you do is that if, for instance, you have a culture of, oh, in Yoruba land, this is how we do things. No. You have to put that aside. We are creating a new identity. And I said it before. If you have nothing in your past to hold on to, that will not be a problem at all. It will not be a problem at all. Because what are you really holding on to? There's nothing grand. I don't want to read some things, but I'm trying to explain to you the mindset that birthed Decree 34, which also gave us that other one that we dealt with earlier. There is nothing really grand. So what is it that, what is it that you can't drop? It's like, when it comes to rich people, the poor people, they have the best ideas of how rich people should spend their money. Abi, if you're talking about the best people with ideas on how you should spend your money are people that don't have their money. They know exactly where to invest. They don't have that money. They know what you should be doing with your money. As a matter of fact, if you make the mistake of letting them know how much you have, they will plan your salary for you, how much you're supposed to, and they are very entitled. Give them something, they will complain for life, just like the £20 policy. It's a pattern, you get. You give something like, it's not really this. Are you not worth more than that? Why are you not giving me more than what you are giving me? Are you a bigot? So you spend the rest of your life proving that you're not a bigot, but the guy is collecting from you. That's where the stealing comes in. It's a mindset. And that's what gave us Decree 34. Now let's go back to educated elites in Nigerian society. I want to read what the academicians or lecturers, what they said. In the words of the academicians themselves, all the time tribalists, who drew up the argument for secession as early as May 1966. By the way, I didn't stay on that for a bit, but I should say something here very quickly. The plan to secede, the Eastern plan to secede was actually in 1963. That was when it started. Inspired by oil money, right? And also the census crisis, to be fair. There was also a census crisis, and the Eastern region wasn't having any of it. And they had the right to speak up at that point, to be honest. The North was taking a piss. And the East had to do what the East had to do. But by 66 May, Igbo intellectuals were making the case for secession. By June 66, Ojukwu declared that he was going to create his own nation. You find it in the book by Nebogram Douglas, Ojukwu's Rebellion and World Opinion. It's in the Telegram channel, Redomi Global. So if you go there, Redomi Global, Redomi Global, you find it there. He said on or before June 7, Ojukwu already made up his mind. But what Ojukwu was saying in June was based on what the intellectuals were saying in May. And what those intellectuals were saying in May was what was now announced May of the following year. The reason they gave Nigeria or gave the world was that, oh, the Northerners are killing our people August, September. So we had to call on them to come back home. August, September, October, November, everybody come back home. Then in January, we now went to Aburi. Then in March, they gave us decree number 8, but we said no because we are stubborn. Or let me say, Ojukwu was stubborn. And then by May, he then declared Biafra. But it was because of what they were doing to our people. It's a lie. They already decided to do that even before the killing started. But let's read here. In the words of the academicians, themselves all the time tribalists who drew up the argument for secession as early as May 1966, since the last event, unification decree, it has become crystal clear that the former leaders of the action group have, as predicted, joined forces with the former leaders of the NNDP in a renewed battle against Easterners. In case you have not, you're just hearing these words for the first time. Action group was a Western party, was a major Western party. It was the party that Papa founded in 1951. Awolowo. NNDP was the faction that broke out under Akintola, and they took the name of Abat Macaulay's party, Nigerian National Democratic Party. But by 66, they had begun to come back together. Okay, if you read that report from 64, one of the people that actually, I mean, to be fair, they were also having their own issues amongst themselves, our Akintola factions. So, which is the Yoruba problem that we must be very careful not to resurrect, especially with the next election. Don't, if you're not voting Tinubu, just God bless you. You can do whatever you want to do, but don't come and be saying, let's prove something that we are tribalized. I don't care for the tribalization. Tinubu is my candidate, by the way. I'm by the grace of God, he will win. So we were just having our own in-house nonsense, fighting ourselves for rubbish reasons. Absolute nonsense. But we talked about that before, we'll talk about it again. Anyway, so we had our own issues. But I want sorry guys. Somehow I attract great people every day. But you know, somewhere in there, in the cracks, there's always, I don't know where the cracks, I will find a way to deal with the cracks. Retards always find their way in, and they're always from the south. I don't know why. I don't know why. Anyway, are you from Ondo State? I like your surname. Boromi Deleru, the Rusida people now began to push propaganda. It's in their own protocol. I read it here before. They said it themselves. They said this Awolowo propaganda is, in fact, no, let me read it so it doesn't come lying. Play up Awolowo at all times. I won't read from the beginning, just this part. Play up Awolowo at all times. This will keep up the resistance of the action group members and stop them from uniting with the NNDP to form a solid Yoruba front. This is vital, and there's no longer a headache or danger to us. Saying Awolowo was no longer a headache or danger to them. Intensify all propaganda against Akintola. Don't hold that he's sufficiently discredited already. He's still dangerous. We must keep the quarrel between himself and the action group alive. This will ensure the disunity amongst the Yoruba leaders. Seek all means to discredit Fani Kayode. He is the real and only barrier to our domination of the West and our ultimate control of the Federation. Who wrote that? Igbo National Caucus, 1964. The point is, we were already having our own issues. They now came to do their Rusida, and Boromi Deleru help us now amplify our wala. Especially from 63, that Papa went to prison. See, they were already there. NCNC and NPC had one enemy from 1960. And that one enemy was Awo. And they dealt with him from 62 to 63 until he went to prison. And it was both the North and the East that did it. It wasn't like the North was, not culpable. They were together. They planned it. They executed it. It was well done. They sealed it so well that, even the judge said, "My hands are tied." They sent him to prison. When they now finished, they now started facing each other. If you notice very well, if you read Nigeria's history, the East and the North did not fight until 1963. They began to fight in 63 after the census figures were announced. That was the same year they created Midwest. Contrary to what Awo would have wanted, that was the same year they sent Awo to prison. And that was the same year they started fighting. But while they were doing that, we were also fighting amongst ourselves. We don't used to fight others, now ourselves we used to fight, because we need to think straight. May God help you, Yoruba people. And I say it again with all these divisions, we don't need it. Anyway, while all of that was going on, I think after a while, we're not like, Jamo, Otirewa. I ever fought like that with somebody say, me, Jamo, Otiremi. Yoruba people were not like, Jamo, Otirewa, around 60. Actually, they started forming some kind of unity around 64. No, around 64. It was one of those things that led to the white paper on political alignment in Western Nigeria. That paper is also available on the Telegram channel. That paper was published by the Western Caucus of NNDP. But what they were saying was also aligning with what Akintola was saying. Sorry, Western Caucus of NCNC. But what they were saying aligned with what Akintola was saying in NNDP. Anyway, by 66, Yoruba people don't fight, don't tire. So they were now trying to come back together and say, you know what, let's give ourselves brain. Let's find a way to do things. Awo was still in prison. Papa was still in prison. He will be in prison until August 2nd, released by Gowon. To be released by Gowon, but he was still in prison at this point. So like, you know what, guys, I say, we have to give ourselves brain. Let's be together. And then Igbo lecturers now began to write against the fact that they were trying to come together. That's how you discover that although you have your own cracks within you, you also have some demon-possessed people who just have at the back of their minds the possession of other people's territories, not as a party, but as an ethnic group. Let me read to you what they said. Igbo lecturer. So, since the last event, Unification Decree, it has become crystal clear that the former leaders of the Action Group, Yoruba, have, as predicted, joined forces with the former leaders of the NNDP and the Yoruba Group. That's the Akintola Group. And this was after Akintola was killed, by the way, in a renewed battle against Easterners. Recent events have further demonstrated that these leaders are clearly striving. Recent events have further demonstrated that these leaders are clearly striving to counter the efforts of the military regime to forge national unity. That word again. Unity. In this respect, the Western leaders are one with the Northern leaders who are similarly opposed to a unitary system of government in Nigeria. And all of them are anxious that the country should revert to the old federal structure, which, as everyone knows, was the principal cause of most of the woes of the First Republic. These were lecturers, supposedly educated people. Your mind says, if Awo wasn't in prison, does it mean that the Midwest state creation wouldn't have scaled through? We'll never know. It probably would have sailed through regardless. They would have been able to get it done, but it would have been tougher. But they would have got, because they had the majority anyway. So back to what we're saying here. So they're saying that, listen, these guys are coming together. They're against unitary system. The unitary system is a way for the federal government to unite the country. But these Yoruba bigots, they are coming together. And by the way, it's like they have the same mindset as the Northerners. They also want federal system. When you live in a country that is as diverse as Nigeria, it should be foolhardy for you to assume unity or to even force it. You build Nigeria along the lines of its differences, not of unity. And what I'm saying right now will sound very, very counterproductive or counterintuitive, but it's the truth. You build a country like this along the differences that we have, not along the supposed unity we're trying to form. Say, are we all black together? We're all black. I'm also black as Kenyans. And if you build anything based on phenotype, you're not thinking straight, because one day who you really are will come out, and it's not based on color, it's based on your sense, it's based on your value system. So essentially, they're saying things like, oh, these people are coming together, they don't want us to have this unity, and so we shouldn't have a federal system. But what we should be having, or what they should have been talking about, is a federal system. That's why when I hear, and with all due respect, when I hear folks from the East just jump to the point where Nigeria is bad, we need federal system, I'm like, we need true federalism, we need regional system. I'm like, who scattered you the first time? And don't say Ironsi. It wasn't Ironsi. It wasn't a person. It was a culture. It was a culture. And again, I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. Listen, if you ever get to do anything, who you are will show. It's not like it doesn't make you a bad person. It may show that you are not really evolved. And we cannot be malu loko ya otogabe general. It may show that you're not evolved, but it doesn't mean you're bad. Who you are, you're about pay in contact by jelly magbefo. Now waiting bird chop, bird go take fly. Does that sound right? Yes. 1 second. I'm trying to get us on Twitter. Anyway, you're about to wait in contact by jelly magbefo. So watch and we're like sponges. If you squeeze us, what comes out is what's within us. Okay, so if a person, thank you, Edauto, if a person has access to certain opportunities or certain spaces, what happens is that what's within them is what comes out, right? So when pressure comes and you squeeze them, whatever comes out is what's really in them. And yes, you to pay finiwa. To buy the magolo yo, abi yo rude. Okay, yeah. So we're talking about what the lecturers, what they were saying at the time, that the West and the North favored federal system, and that the cause of Nigeria's woes, according to them, the principal cause of most of the woes of the First Republic was the federal structure. Okay, and it's also different from what you hear today, where certain intellectuals are saying that they want strong men in Nigeria, and then they act surprised when they hear that there was a military coup. Like, how do you get strong men? The way you are saying, say you're looking for Ataturk. Ataturk is not, nobody voted Ataturk, So, anyway, where were we? Let's go back to Shehu Shagari. In May, Ironsi indicated that jobs and lands anywhere in the country would be available to any Nigerian. Unity power, that's not unity. Why? Listen to the words, jobs and land. How many of you have seen 300, the movie? Anybody, have you seen 300? I can't be the only one who has seen 300. You've seen 300? Okay, good. I'm trying to make small talk before we get back to the real matter. You remember when Xerxes, shall I call him envoy, when they went to Leonidas, and Leonidas asked what they wanted, said they wanted land and water. Don't worry, I connect funny things sometimes. It may never sound funny to you, but it sounds very funny to me. It said that they wanted that what the God King wanted was land and water. Anyway, what Ironsi was giving people here was job and land. Now you have to sit down for a second. So this will help you resolve this thing about they hate these people, they hate these people, they hate that people. It's not about hate. Think about it. Why? Yes, earth and water. Yeah, it's even better. Thank you, consider preventors. Earth and water. That guy was from Ghana. I think it was Ghanaian. The tall guy. The emissary. So all the God King, I can't remember. All the God King demands is earth and water. The other just kicked him. So you'll find lots of it down there. And then the guy just entered Conga. All right, so yeah, I just wanted to say that, but let's get back to this. So Ironsi indicated that jobs and lands anywhere in the country will be available to any Nigerian. Now, when you see this, yeah, this is Sparta. That was a brilliant movie, by the way, by all standards. I think it's one of the best movies, or I mean, historical movie. I mean, stay true to a very large extent. Very good movie. But the point I'm trying to make is that one was talking about earth and water. This one's talking about jobs and land. Here's the thing. If you're from the south and you say, oh, they didn't allow us in because they had land and jobs, you have to think like the owner. And I think one of the problems we have in Nigeria is that people already think like owners. When people have conversations, and this includes Yoruba people as well, we think, even sometimes you're not thinking like who you are thinking like a nomad. You see, when people talk about, why are you even talking about this indigenous bill? Why are you even talking about state creation? Why are you even having a problem with unitary decree? It's because you are thinking like a nomad. A nomad is actually respectful. The worst one is a vagabond. You can pick your choice. Anyway, the point is, nomads don't have any sense of ownership for the most part because they have to move from time to time. Again, it's not an insult, it's just the reality. Gypsies also move. You just have to move. So you don't stay in a place for too long. So it's natural for you to want to be here. Like you're not really putting down you're not putting down roots anywhere. You're somewhere for a while, you're operated, you're going to another place. So the idea of owning something is foreign. Like the idea of that attachment that people have. Why are you attached to it? What is it about this? This is my hometown. This is Lagos. They have another conversation about that on social media, on Twitter the other day. Lagos. Why are you guys always talking about Lagos? It's because you don't have the sense of ownership. Those who own a thing are not flippant about it. They don't just throw it anywhere and say it's just trivial. It doesn't really matter. They own it. So what the Northerners are saying here is this. This man saying that all the lands and jobs everywhere in Nigeria belong to everybody. What he's saying, that's one Nigeria. Here's the question. Do I have any reason to go to this place? Number one. Number two, why should I give up what is mine? Because of a person who is moving from one place to another. What if after I move to my place, he moves to another place, owns another place, and say, okay, Shebi, we are all together. So you can state stuff as a citizen, move to another part of Yoruba land, stay there for another 10 years, put some children there and be doing whatever business they're doing, move to another place. That is the idea. You are technically dispossessing the owners of that space. In other words, you are trying to prove the tribalization to the nomad while displeasing the owner. That has to be stupid. That's not unity. Now, I think they cause fight much later than that. So when the person can't get to a particular point, like, wait, I don't fit off my ass again. If I talk my question, all of us so now. And if I talk the question with God, after they go carry knife or cutlass. Is it right? Of course it's not. But why not nip it in the bud? Even at the risk of being called a tribalist. Let's go on. But given the climate of inter-ethnic mistrust and lands in the north, I'm trying to get you to what happened in May. I hope we get that before we leave today. Jesus, it's Kwara State. Okay. We'll rush. Such apprehension was compounded, listen to this, such apprehension was compounded by the northerly influx since January, as soon as the coup happened. Northerly influx since January of Eastern school leavers in search of jobs or opportunities for higher education. Opportunities ma yakpansing. All this northern Guinea, northern civil service, shidano, we all own it together. That's not unity. That's theory. or stealing, but I like thievery better. Where were we? The political temperature in the north was brought to a head on 24 May when Ironsi announced Decree number 33 and 34 of Decree number 33 and number 34 of 1966 in a national broadcast. Decree number 33, which proscribed all political parties and numerous ethnic associations, was straightforward enough. But Decree number 34 was a different kettle of fish. It purportedly unified the country by abrogating the federal framework, replaced the regions with groups of provinces, and unified the federal and regional public services. What does that mean in 2026? Let me give an example. Oyo State has its own civil service commission. Lagos State has, Ẹkáàbọ has, Ondo has, Enugu has, Bauchi has, Sokoto has. Now imagine a crackhead come along in 2026 and tells you that all the civil service commissions of all the states have now become one, so that people can move freely from place to place in the name of unity. Why did they move to the north more than the west? Sorry, I want to answer a question in the comment section. Why did they move more to the north? Why did they move to the north more than the west? Because the north had more deficit than the west in jobs that require, academic qualifications. They had more deficit because they didn't get into schooling early enough. To be honest, were disadvantaged educationally. Many of the people, of course, they started going to school around 60, 62, but they weren't going to school as much as others. Therefore, the East, by the way, the East did this, the Igbos did the same thing in the Midwest, by the way, just saying. But they focused on the North because there were more opportunities there. And that's the reason for the interview that the Sardauna granted in 1964, that people call tribalistic. There is no sane human being who would understand the circumstances surrounding that speech or that interview that would call that man tribalist. He was the premier of a region that did not have a lot of graduates, but now, by the way, Sardauna did not go to our institution, no. What book was I reading 2 days ago? Oh, Let the Truth Be Told. That's the title of the book. Let the Truth Be Told. It was written by a man who works with him. And we'll talk about, maybe one of these, we'll talk about that book. One of the reasons Sardauna also acted the way he did was he also felt inferior when he was with these other guys. These were lawyers and, journalists and stuff. Sardauna had only, equivalent to a high school. And for that, based on what he did, you wouldn't be able to tell, which means that he did well, regardless of his level of education. And so he was one of the few who even got the opportunity to go to school. And by the way, I should quickly say this. The reason they also didn't go to school was because of the British and the Fulani oligarchy. We all know that back in, this is not part of the topic, I'm already digressing. We all know that the major group that actually got education into different parts of the country, first, whether you like it or not, they were missionaries. And the British government actually stopped missionaries from going north. So, and if you didn't go north, if missionaries did not go north, that means education doesn't go north. And they did that for a particular reason. Because, let's not change topic. But the point is that they had to keep the north the way the north was in order to favor them and the Fulani, and they achieved it. But of course, every disadvantage sometimes is harmful. Okay, so the Western education, well, you couldn't lead the society with Arabic education. That's the problem. And let me also say something about this whole Western. Listen, there is Islamic education. There is Arabic education. What people had in the north was not even Arabic education, was Islamic education. You would not be able to govern a modern state based on Islamic education. That's the truth. I mean, Sadana said it. Read this book, My Life. That is autobiography. He mentioned why they had to create a northernization policy. They had to be Western. How you go write letter and Arabic you go use Ajami. The Western mindset was what dominated the world at the time. So yes, I know where you are going when you say Western education, like Western education, but they were also educated. Most of the things they say, yes, sure. Let's just leave it like that. I agree with you, but you get my point too. Where was I? Oh, Papa had that question. What was the question? The question was, why did they go north? They went north because majority of the northern guys were not going to school. So by 60, 61, 62, they began to really push their people. That's everybody north, the young people. So when Sadana gave that interview, I don't know if you, does anybody know the interview I'm talking about? Maybe you should help me catch my breath. Does anybody know the interview I'm talking about? Let me just see in the comment section. Take a listen, please.
One thing I've noticed, Premier, while I've been here, is that Northerners seem to have, I might almost call it obsession about the Igbos. Could you perhaps explain that to me?
Well, the Igbos are more or less the type of people whose desire is mainly to dominate everybody. If they go to a village, to a town, they want to monopolize everything in that area. If you put them in a labor camp as a laborer, within a year they will try to emerge as headman of that camp, and so on. Well, in the past, our people were not alive to their responsibilities, because you can see from our northernization policy that in 1952, when I came here, there weren't 10 northerners in our civil service here. And I tried to have it northernized, and now all important posts are being held by northerners.
Is this policy of filling all key posts in the north solely with northerners and not with other Nigerians a temporary or permanent one?
In actual fact, what it is a northerner first. If you can't get a northerner, then we take an expatriate like yourself on contract. If we can't, then we can employ another Nigerian, but on contract too. This is going to be permanent, I should say, as far as I can foresee, because it will be rather dangerous to see the number of boys who are now turning from all our learning institutions coming out with having no work to do. I'm sure whichever government of the day might be, it will feel rather embarrassed, and it might even lead to bloodshed.
Doesn't this damage the idea, sir, of all people in all regions in Nigeria being fellow citizens of one country?
Well, it might, but you are, I mean, new to our region, but how many northerners are employed in the east or in the west? The answer is no. And if there are, there may be 10 laborers employed only in the two regions.
All right, thank you very much. So that was around 1964. And to be clear, when I listened to the first part of that, I felt like, oh, you're a tribalist. And I listened to the second part, I was like, oh, I get where you're coming from, right? And people talk about the beauty of ambition, but we really talk about the beauty of order. Sometimes people will say, oh, I can go anywhere, I'll just displace everybody and become King Kong. It's nice, right, if you do it understanding structure, and that when you get there, you won't change the order of things by pushing your people in there, which was the experience in the Midwest, in the North, and in Lagos, the capital at the time. Filled every place with folks from a particular place. There's no way those people will now begin to have graduates, and so essentially they moved north because they had less educated people. Let's go back to the book. All right, very quickly, and to be clear, you won't change the order of things by pushing your people in there, which was the experience in the Midwest, in the North, and in Lagos, the capital at the time. Filled every place with folks from a particular place. there's no way those people will now begin to have graduates and so essentially they moved north because they had less educated people. Let's go back to the book. All right, very quickly. The political temperature in the north was brought to a head on 24 May when Ironsi announced Decree number 33 and number 34 of 1966 in a national broadcast. Decree number 33, which proscribed all political parties and numerous ethnic associations, was straightforward enough. But Decree number 34 was a different kettle of fish. It purportedly unified the country by abrogating the federal framework. Okay? Replaced the regions with groups of provinces and unified the federal and regional public services. So you can, like I said earlier, you can move people from Lagos State and move them to Sokoto, just like the federal government does with the parastatal. Now imagine that there is no state parastatal. So now we have federal parastatals and they transfer people anyhow, like they do. And then you have states. Now imagine there is no states. We just have federal because we are all one Nigeria. From the northern viewpoint, the implications of all this in terms of distribution of power, the allocation of public resources and amenities, the prospect of Igbo and Southern domination, and the threat, by the way, you see that word again? They use Southern because they want to be PC. It actually meant Igbo. You wrote Igbo there, by the way, but you had to add Southern to add to be PC. But you always see that phrase everywhere. So it talks about the threat of Igbo and Southern domination, and the threat to mainstream Northern ways of life were unmistakable. It was, however, the unification of the public services which really provoked the severest anxiety among senior Northern civil servants. In itself, this directly affected only few top positions and allowed regional control over appointment to all junior provincial-based federal posts. In other words, if you were in the north, the federal government would allow the regional guys or people in those provinces to choose junior staff. But when it comes to the senior category or the senior cadre, it was at the discretion of the central, or it's not even federal, the central government. So essentially, what happened, and I should say this, what happened with the VCs would have happened in the public service, where you had DK in UI and you had Njoku in Unilag, and then you had folks dominating Yaba Tech, all of them same ethnic group, but you can't complain, we're all one Nigeria. So as that was going on, you could just do the same thing for all the parastatals, NBC. I think that actually happened in NBC, Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, National Broadcasting Corporation, I think they called it. Right, any major parastatal, I'll just be putting people that you like there, and we know who you like. Back to this. So it says here, it was, however, the unification of the public services which really provoked the severest anxiety among senior Northern civil servants. In itself, this directly affected only few top positions and allowed federal control over appointment to all junior provincial-based federal posts. Allowed regional control over appointment to all junior provincial-based federal posts. Northern bureaucrats, nevertheless, perceived it as a menace, not only to the newfound influence of the higher civil service, but to their own individual career prospects as well. The anxiety born of a strong suspicion of an Igbo design for hegemony was worsened because Mr. Nwokedi, an Igbo crony of Ironsi, had solely authored the interim report which led to the unification decree. He said it here, the other man said it in his own book as well. One man decided. Northern administrative officers were further galled by an official seniority list based on salary and date of appointment and prepared by an Igbo colleague of Nwokedi, which showed many of them way below their southern equals just because their government paid the least salaries. In other words, since you were paying less in your former region, what's the word now? Your salary will determine your scale in this new order, this new public service. So they're paid less, so it says here, Northern administrative officers were further galled by an official seniority list based on salary and date of appointment and prepared by an Igbo colleague of Nwokedi, which showed many of them way below their southern equals just because their government paid the least salaries. The West never really has issues with things like this because we never really fought with people on things like that. The Western region paid more than the federal government even before the coup, starting with our law. When I mean paid more, I'm talking about what's that thing they call it? Minimum wage. Let's go on. We have gotten to where we were going since morning. On 27th and 28th May, peaceful demonstrations by civil servants and university students in the North greeted the unification decree because both groups saw it as threatening their present and future careers respectively. What does this mean? If you're an ABU and you now see that there's now one civil service, and because your region was paying less before, it means that you are lower than your Igbo counterpart, even though you got into public service before him in the North. He's coming from the East, but now you are lower. So essentially, and you're a student, so you know you're fighting for your future. So they began to protest on 27th and 28th May. Meanwhile, there occurred another provocation which deeply wounded Northern and in particular Muslim sensibilities. The June 1966 edition of Drum, a highly popular magazine, was out on sale few days after the unification decree. So the magazine was for June, but it was out just after May 24. Okay. One feature article entitled Why Nigeria Exploded dwelt on the bogey of Northern domination. It also scorned previous political leaders except Dr. Azikiwe and Okpara, both of them Igbo. Does that sound remotely familiar? You know all the politicians in Nigeria today are all corrupt except Itobi. You know, Abi? And OT, and anybody from the Southeast, especially if they are not in, if they're in LP or ADC, they cannot be corrupt. If you're in APC, they are corrupt. So all the presidential candidates today, it's only Peter Obi that is not corrupt. It's the same thing that happened in 1966. One feature article entitled Why Nigeria Exploded dwelt on the bogey of Northern domination. It also scorned previous political leaders except Dr. Azikiwe and Okpara, both of them Igbo. The writer was the magazine's editor, Nelson Otta, also an Igbo. Even more distasteful was another article on the slain Northern Premier entitled Sir Amodu rose in his shrouds and spoke from the dead. Written by Kozi Dakpo, another Igbo journalist, the feature carried a phony photograph of Sir Amodu's robed body placed on a bier before a Dakpo and with a crowd watching. This showed Sir Amodu allegedly confessing his foolish misdeeds, in quotes, and asking Idapo for forgiveness. When was this? May. That will be the last week of May 1966. So if you think they beat them because of January, you are wrong. And you remember what we said already. They had songs, you know, Rex Lawson's Ewan Abakwa, Celestine Oku's machine gun, the tauntings in the streets, the brandishing cutlasses. If you read if you read Tragedy of Victory by Abisama, you see that Abubakar was talking about brandishing of cutlasses in the streets, shouting that they had won, singing war songs in the North. And they also did almanacs, bread labels of the Sadauna being slain by, you know, Zogu, and now you are showing him confessing his misdeeds to you. Who are you? Within 24 hours of the magazine reaching a number of northern cities and towns, and against the backdrop of the protests by civil servants and students, riots swept across the north for several days, beginning from Sunday 29th May. The result was catastrophic. Igbo people and their churches were attacked, their shops, businesses and homes looted, while hundreds lay dead and injured. Along with the mayhem came the Hausa cry of Araba, let's split up, which immediately seized northern imagination. The politics of ethnic violence, which the January coup makers made their hallmark, are taking an uglier turn. But this time, mostly by the northern urban jobless and ruffians. Some order was, however, quickly restored thanks to the prompt intervention of Saud. In retrospect, my assurance to Dr. Orizu that the northern violent next week. Monday will be here, but most likely we're going to have a recording because of some engagement. So we got into all of this because of an interview that I listened to a while back when the person said, and the person's Igbo was an Igbo intellectual, and he said that in the minds of the Igbo, Nigeria's history begins July of 1966. I was not like, how can you start with counter coup without talking about the coup? And then how can you talk about all of these things without talking about the killings in May? But how can you talk about the killings in May without talking about what led to it, which is actually the actions of certain people? And the straw that broke the camel's back was Decree 34. All right, that effectively abolished the regions. Gowon did not abolish regions. Gowon broke regions further into states. And by March 17, 1967, gave to the regions what the regions did not even have before Ironsi came. Made Nigeria a confederal state with Decree number 8 of March 67, although Juku rejected it. And we'll talk about that next week and how, everything then, went to the dogs. But I think one of the books we should read will be Ojuku's Rebellion and World Opinion. If you want to read it before then, you can, check it out on Telegram channel. Our Telegram channel is Rudomic Global. You can download it for free. And I think it will be a good resource on this particular topic. Thank you very much for listening. That was how Ironsi abolished Nigeria's regions. And that decree was what eventually led to the riots in May. I'll say this before I leave. Before I bring... it's almost 9 now. I just want to do to me. I have to be out of here like in the next... But I'll say this, that I don't think anything can justify the killing of people, Igbos or not. Nothing can justify killings of people. But you see, you can't move mad. You can't move mad and do whatever you like, and whenever the consequences now come, I'll be like, I didn't do anything. So when you talk about July, when you talk about May, and when you talk about 1945, one day I was listening to this lady, Chimamanda, and oh God. Again, it's not about the person, it's the culture. It doesn't matter how educated or seemingly educated people are, it's the same mindset. So the Igbos, the Hausas, the Northerners are killing them in 45 just because they were jealous. Because they were killing. When people are so simplistic in their analysis of things, why does this happen to us? Because they hate us. What makes you so special that they just hate you everywhere you go? What happened in 45 happened, it was terrible, by the way, it can't be justified. Nothing can justify it. But it happened because of what Chancellor Yema said in Lagos. What did he say? The domination of Nigeria by the Igbos is only a question of time. People heard it and took it seriously. By May, I said, the kidney, it was bad. It was also because of that decree and the things that he has been talking about. Land and job belongs to everybody. Everything belongs to everybody. And the same thing with July. It was the response to what happened in January. The point is that we have to understand the law of cause and effect. And anybody can make mistakes, but be mature enough to say, guess what? I made a mistake there. I'm sorry. And then you move on. Rather than saying, it's not me, it's somebody else. I can never do it. My father can never make mistake. I can never make mistake. When you talk like that, you must be very, very, very primitive. That means you don't know how to take responsibility and you cannot build society. That's what it means. But thank you very much for listening. By the way, if you're joining us for the first time, we have these sessions every weekday. It's Monday to Friday, 4 p.m. if you're time West African time. All right, thank you very much for listening to that. That was how Ironsi abolished Nigeria's regions with Decree 34. I hope you had a great time listening to that. And before we go, I'm just going to respond to some of the things in the comment section. okay, sections I should say, because we're on a number of platforms at the same time. Akadol on TikTok says they still lack the emotional intelligence, as was the case with their forebears. Sadly, that's true. Ose Global says those who cannot remember the past, it's actually those who can't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. That's George Santayana. Thank you very much. And to be honest, if you really study Nigeria's history, I think one of the interesting thing and one of the unfortunate things about Nigerian history is that whenever I study it, I don't know about you, but when I read, it's as though you're experiencing deja vu. Like when you look at the news feels like deja vu, like you've seen it before. Everything that happens everything that's happening has happened. And it's good because you can predict what's going to happen, so you can properly prepare and fix whatever is happening, right? But it's bad because you are not moving forward if you are repeating the same mistakes. Okay? And so one day I had to sit down, like, is this really a mistake? And I discovered that for the most part, it's not really a mistake. It's culture. You are used to doing a thing, culture and tradition. And when we say culture and tradition, our mind usually goes to one Paobi, one Memo, one Fim, one Borisha. Culture and tradition, they are beyond all those things. Some people's traditions is Lebensstrom. And we talked about it last week. 1955 speech of John Macpherson at Chatham House in London. He talked about the fact that the Easterners, especially the Igbos, wanted Lebensstrom. That was 1955. Then you read the newspaper of 2025 and you discover we're discussing indigenous bill. That's deja vu. You are literally reliving the past. Because the culture, the reality is that people want more space. Therefore, they never really grow out of being able to actually use what they have. But that covetousness is still present. It's how you see people go on social media right now and just curse out everybody. It's exactly what folks did in 1966. You see, back then, you had a few newspapers, right? Today, everybody's a journalist, so to speak. So what Nelson Otta did, for instance, with the newspaper, where they were, just lambasting the Northerners and the leaders, they were absolving their own leaders of any faults. That's what people still do on Twitter today, and on TikTok and on Facebook. What the other writer in that newspaper did, where he placed the Sardauna on a beer and asked him, made him essentially ask for forgiveness from the writer, who is an able person. And then the image I don't know if you've seen that image before, the image where, okay, it's another device. Maybe another day I will show you that image. I'll put it up here. The image where the Chloroquine, Zogu, was on a horse, and then his feet was on the Sardauna's neck. That picture, everything that happened is happening. A couple of weeks ago, a clown made a picture, something like that, but was now Peter Obi and Ashwaju. The real issue is that cultures have to evolve. There's no perfect culture in the world, not even my own. I'm Yoruba. I'm proud, very proud of it. But I also understand the fact that culture is dynamic. So there's nothing like, we're the best. We've gone, everybody grows. But that's where the beauty is, where you are growing. The real problem in Nigeria is that many cultures, particularly the ones we're discussing today, is stagnant. It's like the Dead Sea. Nothing lives. So what that means basically is that there's no growth, there's repetition of errors, and whenever you talk about what they have done, they go into two things. Number one, they blame you for it. Number two, which is a problem of number one, they never take responsibility for anything. In other words, it's never their fault. Even Peter Obi did it last week. Simple question about ADC. He said it was the government that was responsible. How on earth does a person have conversations about what's happening in his own home, and the only person responsible for the issues is always somebody outside? Interpretation. Like, it means you can't lead your space because you can't always outsource responsibility, and so it's those people's fault. You're always pointing fingers. It's what happened with the war. It's what happens with Nigerian history. You see, where you mess up, me, I will mention, we've talked about this several times. In fact, even in today's stuff we just listened to, I mentioned it. Why? So that we can learn not to repeat it. So we learn from that past so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. That's it. But imagine I say, oh, see what the Yoruba people do. It's not really our fault, though. It's the Hausas that made us do it. It's the Igbos that made us do it. You can be sure we're going to repeat that same thing. I'll give an example. Earlier this year, Pastor Sunday Bakari, he said some people had reached out to him to come join a particular political party, and he mentioned some names. I'm not going to go into it. But he said something very important, and I felt like this man understands history. He said, we are not going to have another Awolowo Akintola in Yoruba land. I was like, brilliant. It's not that we're having two political parties, it's that one party is splitting into two because of what one person wants, even if it's at the detriment of, I can't say the detriment of others, but it essentially does not work with the vision that we've been working with for a while. So he said, we're not going to have Awolowo and Akintola here. Why did he make that choice? Because he understood what happened in the past. So this whole conversation, and I see a lot of clowns in the comment section, most of us Igbos, insulting me and cursing me out. You got to actually grow up. Like, you cannot be doing this because that's what your fathers did in 66. It's just because your fathers did in 45. How can you be on the same level? 1940, it's 81 years. You are better than everybody. You are clinical than everybody. Everybody is lower than you, but you want what everybody has, and you never make any effort. Anybody that cannot take responsibility cannot be a leader in anything. And you can understand why some people would never lead anywhere. You can make of that whatever you will. Get angry, curse me out. If I have time, I'll respond to you, Sha. So I'm going to go into the comment section now, and if I feel like I should, I'll pray for you afterwards. Let me read some things. Chukudima on YouTube says you're an ethnic bigot. That's the language of fools. Right? You can have a conversation about anything. Could be talking about rice and beans. They will reduce it to your ethnic. It doesn't mean anything. Maybe you should play that card with your dad. Like when you say somebody's a bigot, he's a bigot. It doesn't. This is not your family meeting. God bless you, Sha. I don't want to read that one. Somebody says why I hate Igbos. I don't want to read that. Let's not let it get to that point. Don't worry. Just keep people where they belong. Be firm, but it's called tough love. So I'm going to skip some things. You might say on YouTube, Buhari also tried to use backdoor channels to carve lands across Nigeria for his kinsmen through the field Ruga, cattle colony, cattle grazing road, water resources bill, and so on. Yes. And we also spoke up against it. Ruga is not different from indigenous bill. And I think I've talked about it before. Maybe another day, Sha. Ruga is essentially the same. In fact, Ruga is even worse. Because what Ruga does is it creates colonies in other people's lands. And it's not new. It's happened in Wase. It's happened in Kaduna. It's happened in Jos. Where people eventually own, in Tosha, that was in the late 70s? I think it was in the late 70s, right? Now it's like a community on its own, populated by the Fulani. It's a very interesting way of doing things, but it makes no sense. Like, you can't, see, land is in short supply. And the funny thing about it is that God is not creating any more land. That's why in time past, you fought to get more land. And now people can't fight. So what they're doing is to either to use one law or use another thing, and it's not going to work. So I'll advise those who have smaller lands, listen, there's nobody God has not blessed. The reason you think that you don't have is because you have not appreciated what you have. You don't appreciate it, and that's why you will lose it. Jesus gave a parable in the book of Matthew, I think it's chapter 25, was talking about the three servants. One had 5 talents. Talent, by the way, is currency. One had 5 talents. The other one had, so let's say $5. The other one had 3. One had 5, one had 2, one had 1. The one with 5 doubled it. The one with 2 doubled his own. The one with 1 hid it. And Jesus said they should take the one, the guy that had 1, they should take what he had and give it to the one who now had 10. And then he said something very interesting. It says that the one who has, more will be given to him. But the one who doesn't, even that which he has will be taken from him. So the question I ask, if you said this one doesn't have, and that which he has will be taken from him, what are you taking from him if he doesn't have? Clearly, he has something. He just doesn't send. He doesn't think much of it. So God hates when somebody is not productive. So just take what that person has and give it to somebody who can be busy and make something out of it. And it's the same thing with life. I said that to say that when people look at a particular region and they just don't think they have enough, it's because they've not appreciated what they have in their own land. Okay? Singapore doesn't have arable land. There's a particular province where Singapore partnered with China, a province in China, where they have Singaporean companies, planting and doing major farming. But it's based on agreements, not based on Lebensraum. By the way, why do people still stick to this Nazi ideology of Aryan race and Lebensraum? We'll have that conversation another time. Just to tell people that we know what you're doing. It can work in your home, but it's not going to work in ours. God bless you. And thank you, Your Might, for bringing up that Ruga thing. Yes, and that's why we're against Ruga, and that's why it's never going to work. You can't go around Nigeria carving people's lands because you don't have much. There's no reason to do so. God has blessed everybody, including the Fulani, including everybody. There's no one God has not blessed. We just need to be less covetous. Or we should not be covetous at all. Paul Momi Chinyere says that their father is an idiot who is always talking about evil people. Okay, thank you for telling us that your dad is an idiot. Let's go to Your Might. Your Might says, Paul Momi, you are responding to the clown. Everything that the host has said or read out is true. If you don't know what happened yesterday, it is likely you not know how to resolve the issue of today, let alone of tomorrow. You think this one wants to resolve any issues? They don't want to resolve any issues. They just what they want is two things. Number one, you've got to be quiet about the past because it makes them look bad. Number two, you've got to make them feel good. I am not your comedian. You're not even paying for me to be here. I'm not a comedian. I'm not going to say anything to make you feel. If you want that, go and pay and see backing off. Right? But it's actually quite interesting. You lot, and that's the funny thing. You would never, ever see them say, according to this book, what you are saying is wrong. Because a person whose life revolves around news, invoice and receipts, they don't read. Just be talking rubbish, insulting your dad in the comment section. God bless you, Sha. Well, your dad is an idiot, according to you. Lilala says Yoruba land is on fire. Your family house is on fire. It is not Yoruba land. Thank you very much. Let's move away from this retarded people. Ready for show, responding to one of these clowns. Say, what do you expect him to do? If your intellect is at least average, you will understand what he's doing. It is called digital footprint. Yes. Yes. We've got to keep putting these things out. There has to be, we have to create an alternative to the propaganda that's circulating. And the alternative should be and has to be the truth. Okay? I saw a podcast yesterday, some chaps. This chap is in the UK, I think, doing a podcast and talking about what happened during the war. He was talking absolute nonsense, and everything he was saying was Igbo talking point. People are saying it's Igbo, some people say it's not Igbo, but the point is that every single thing he said, you would, if you ever, maybe one day I should even do it. Okay, to share pictures here can be very tricky. If you see propaganda images from Biafra, right, and you hear what people are saying today, you think that they are still fighting the war. They've never healed. But you know what? If you want to believe that and you don't want to heal, that's your business. It's okay for you to be perpetually sick. But you cannot expect the rest of us to affirm you in your insanity. Like, you can keep whatever you want to keep, but don't come and tell me that this is history when I know that you're lying. But I have to say it's true because I have to make you feel happy. You lost. May God heal you if you want it. And by the way, that's not a jab. Jesus used to ask people, do you want to be healed? Right? You don't want to act like they don't have autonomy. Do you want to be healed? The person says no. Jesus is a gentleman. I'm also a gentleman. Okay? Motaya Yola says, people who destroy their own land and run to your land, if you give such people same right as you, they will also destroy your land. Absolutely. And saints, I think I'm wasting time on this thing, but let's just read a few more. Saints on YouTube says, brainwashed. How old were you then? Did you experience the event, and how old were you? That is how another will come research your history. I'm a Christian. Okay? No matter how old I am, definitely I don't have to tell you that I was not there when Jesus walked this earth. The assumption that you have to be alive at the time things happen before you're able to speak on it is asinine, and is a definition of insanity. There's something called book. It's an invention you probably have not heard about. Saint. All of us are learning. Okay, even me, I'm just learning. But as bad as it is, we don't read small. You read books, you talk to people. Okay, and you will know what happened if you're able to research and piece things together. All of us can. There's nobody that can't do it. There's nothing special about it. Even you can do it, as dumb as you are. Everybody can do it. It's just about picking up books. The important thing is that we are open, to information. Okay, and not ask stupid questions like, "Were you there?" Let me tell you one funny thing about this age nonsense that people do. Is that, "Were you there?" There are people who were there who don't know what happened. And it's not because they are terrible people, because they're not smart. They are smart, but they're not in the room. They were not there. There are some things that you just hear on the news. It's not true. And I'll give you an example. I've used this example before. If you remember Saddam Hussein, when America invaded Iraq, what did they tell the world? Or what did they tell their citizens? They said, "Oh, Iraq has WMD, weapons of mass destruction. They're going to destroy the world, blah, blah, blah." They said all those things. Thank you very much for the gift, T. Dan and Abby71. Thanks a lot. They said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. They're going to destroy the world, so on and so on. And then they went there and then they dealt with Saddam Hussein. Now, this is 2026. A person has to need to check into Yaba left or Arrow in Abeokuta to assume that the world must go on with that WMD narrative now that we know that it wasn't true. To talk about American history and the invasion of Iraq at the time, and tells you that George Bush and the oath and Tony Blair and everybody that was talking about WMD, they were not correct. And you now tell that chap that, "Oh, were you there?" You are not being smart. The fact that the person was there or not there doesn't make what they're saying true or not true. It's about the facts of the matter. Counter the facts of the matter, not go about the age of the person. Meanwhile, I'm very sure me and your dad are probably age mates. God bless you. Your mates. Do you even know how many passengers loaded buses come to Yoruba land every day from the east, let alone other regions? Think. People are bad in this comment section. Your mind says, even the Bible says, from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. There are so many things in the comment section. I'm going to have to stop now, but thank you, everybody. I see Mr. Abubakar Jungus. Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate you, sir. Thank you. By the way, I should be spending time with people like you, because this other one is just becoming insulting somebody. But there are good people in the comment section as well, or just in case I have not been enlightened. Maybe let me read some good stuff. It's just that those good people too will be insulting the other people. I don't want to read it out, so it doesn't look like we're, mudslinging. Dance Langate Diggy says middlemen minority tribes, especially the nomadic traders, must learn to integrate into their host culture or live quietly in isolation. The Sadawana recognizes superiority complex. Yes, and superiority complex is actually a product of inferiority, to be fair. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every evil thing. James 3 verse 16. Wow. Two people quoted the same scripture. I mean, is this the same person on Facebook and YouTube? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Doxy says, what is with you and Igbo people? We're discussing how Ironsi abolished Nigeria's regions with Decree 34. That's the topic. But because you're primitive, you come in and assume that it's about you. Because you know that everything a person does in your place, as far as you're concerned in your brain, it's a representation of everything about everybody. Okay, so nobody must talk about what Ironsi did wrong because it's from your place. So when you now talk like that, we now go deep to discover that, oh, wait, oh, maybe these guys are actually correct, though. Maybe they're actually correct, or maybe it's not just what Ironsi did. Then I now discover that, oh, actually, Ironsi was only acting out an ethnic plan. And Doxy, let me quickly answer you. You'll be the last person I respond to on YouTube and Facebook before I move on. So here's the thing, right? 1936, the first Igbo unions started springing up. Not in Igbo land, by the way. That's the funny thing. Not in Igbo land. It was around Nigeria, in Lagos, in Calabar. And 37 was when Zeke came back. And he told the rest of us that all of us, we should forget our ethnicity. He had written a book in 34, The Renaissance Africa, and then was still preaching that message by 1937 when he returned from Ghana, telling us that we should forget about Kiniko. There's no difference between every ethnicity. We are all the same. Okay, thank you very much, sir. By 38, he began to push the Igbo agenda while telling the rest of us that there's no ethnic group in this country. We are tribalists. But his own group was being promoted in his papers and everything he was doing. To make it worse, he also began to downplay other people's groups, also started reducing them, started finding ways to corrode their self-respect, then began to attack their leaders, while telling all of us that we are all the same. By 1944, the Igbo intellectuals had come together to create a plan to dominate Nigeria permanently in 20 years. Right, 20 years. And so they began to work towards that. Then by 51, although by 43, Zeke was toying with the idea of federalism, although he was using it to push an ethnic agenda as usual. By the way, if you read this book, you understand. The book is called The Political Blueprint of Nigeria. I think it was published in 1943, thereabout. And then by 1951, they came out with the idea of unitary system. This was 15 years before Ironsi did what he did. And it was 7 years after the plan to perpetually rule Nigeria. You put 2 and 2 together. And that's why when you read the book by Adewale Ademoyiga, Why We Struck, he mentioned that everything that they did in Ironsi was essentially based on 2 things. Number 1, the ethnicity. Number 2, the party. Said the ethnicity that he was pushing was Igbo, the party was NCNC. It's in the book. You guys recommend that book a lot, but you've never, the book was published in 1981, you've never read that book, because Igbos mentioned that book because in their minds, because man is Yoruba, you know, it shuts you up. But interestingly, once you read that book, it's all that is actually against what they think he's saying. Anyway, so if you're asking me why we're talking about this, we're talking about this because it's Nigeria's history, and your people did terrible things in Nigeria's history. And that spirit is still there with you. That's why you're always acting like a perpetual victim. May God heal you. But whether you heal or not, we're not going to be bothered with your shenanigans. Mr. Douglas says, Prof, when someone insults you, please remember what Socrates said. When the debate is lost, insults become the loser's tool. I will always remember that. Thank you very much, Mr. Douglas. Actually, the truth is, I know, but sometimes I just want to also spy a bit, because I think sometimes people assume that when you're quiet and you don't talk, it means that you're weak. So sometimes you like to but thank you for that wisdom, sir. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to wrap up now. Tomorrow is Friday. We will be here at 4 p.m. if a time West African time. Whether we have a full session, I'm looking at the possibility. Been working on some things, so we'll see if we're able to finish before then, and then we'll be on camera, but we'll see how that goes. But regardless, we'll be here 4 p.m. There are 2 people in the comment section I'd like to bring up. I think they've been waiting. Okay, so I have 2 guests. I'm going to bring them up on. If I had seen you earlier, I would not spend all the time reading the comment section. But yeah, let's just have this 2, and then we'll make it very short, because it's almost, it's to 8. Please make it very, very snappy, and then we'll call it a day. Thank you very much. Bonfire Studios, and Bumblebee. Good evening. Good evening. Okay, I don't think the person even knew they sent a request. All right, it happens sometimes. Makes my work easier, Sha. Thank you. All right, let's call it a day now, okay? I see some things on dear Lord, excuse me. I see some things on TikTok. By the way, let me also say, the people I'm saying they should go and ask their dad is because, to be honest, there are certain things that only their father can tell them. I cannot be wasting my time to be teaching incorrigible people. So may God bless all of us. Oloy of South London asks a question on TikTok. I'm just going to read these questions and I'll just respond to some things and we'll close. Do you think how Ruga was for us could be how the North and the East see state police? No. No. It has nothing to do with that. By the way, the East is not against state police at this point. I mean, by the way, let me also say there's nothing like East anymore. All we have is the Southeast. The Southeast doesn't seem to be against state police. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. And the North. See, when it comes to state policing and security in the North, it's a complex thing. It's not that they don't want the place secure, it's that there are some interests. How do you say this? There are some people who have vested interests in the destabilization of the region. Let's just leave it that way. But it's a bit deeper than that. And it has nothing to do with, it's not the same thing to us as Ruga. It's not like Ruga is people want to take your space. State police is not that you want to go and police North. It means that you should organize something for yourselves. There is something else that runs deeper, and it's a very, very complex thing. It's a very complex thing. And I think if you want to understand that, maybe you can start studying. There's a material, I can't remember the title now, that has to do with how Boko Haram started, okay, and how the bandits came up. You may also look for the connection between the explosion of Boko Haram and the amnesty in the Niger Delta. Okay, I'm not going to say more than that because of time, but you can piece those two together. Just look for, there's a nexus between both two stuff, and then you can, it is well. May there be peace in Nigeria across every region, and I think state police will help everybody. As long as you're not telling people to come and do something for you. So, but it is well. But thank you for that question, Olu of South London. Mumbo, there's so many things in the comment section. I don't want to. I'm just trying to, skip through some things. Oh, you know what I was talking about? The person who said we should remove state of origin and is Yoruba, Akado. Yeah, you mentioned it, but I'm not going to talk about it. Some people, you respect them, just be like, they're jamming like Pabosha. Like, what kind of thing are you saying? Anyway. Now, someone says, now, so one Igbo guy is telling me today that Obatala is an Igbo man. Someone sent me a video, told me to respond to it. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow. Maybe. It has to do with a statement made by the Obi of Onitsha. So a person will come and say Obatala is Igbo. They say with Ofi, they say with Gili, they say it's number one, it's a very confused group. Okay, there is no anchor, there's no root, there's no history of relevance. And you know what? I'm going to talk about this thing tomorrow because this thing is deep. How can you be appropriate your Batala to law? Obatala, Obatash, Obatakutakulu. How are you going to use Obatala as Iboma? One clown wrote one article say Oduduwa is Odundunwa from Ebola. People are mad though. This one is not even, people are crazy. And that's why I said that every time I remember what Buhari said about building psychiatric homes in the Southeast, I know that he wasn't saying that out of hate, and he wasn't throwing jabs either. It was actually referring to something very, very deep, and it has to do with the mindset of the people who are conquered. Because how on earth are you going all over the world looking for your origin? Obatalako. I don't use Obatala's name to even play, Jare. People don't have sense. What do you mean Obatala is? And is someone says if they can appropriate Jesus Christ, then they can appropriate anything. Now that you said that, Akwamide Jabosha. You are right. Because somebody said Jesus Christ is from Imo State. Okay, I found a news report. Establishment of psychiatric clinics. The federal government under President Muhammadu Buhari initiated the building of 15 mental health clinics across the 5 states of the Southeast to improve access to care. We need to ask questions about this thing. Ibono Batisi, what have they done with it? And I'm not even joking. We need to have conversation about this thing. 15 psychiatric outposts in the Southeast. Buhari did that in 2023. Abi? Isha did that not long ago. Yeah, we're going to have a conversation about this thing. Okay? When have they built those psychiatric homes? When do they plan to build it? And this is wait though. I'm looking for the date. It's not today's topic, I will look for it another day, but yeah, I think it was 2023 or something around that. Or 20 anyway, my details for you. All I'm saying is that, you know, as fellow citizens, it's 2023, I found it. As fellow citizens, it's important for us to speak up for our Nigerian citizens. I found what I was looking for. Buhari to open 15 psychiatric outposts in the Southeast. Professor Monday Igwe, the medical director of the Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Enugu, disclosed that the mental health facilities will spread across each senatorial district in the Southeast. Quote, we will ensure that our people have better access to mental health, especially as the president has earmarked an improved budget for health in the last budget, Igwe added. This, guys, I want to pause to just say something. I'll explain this thing in another session. There's a speech that Papa gave after the war where I talked about the fact that the federal government was spending a lot of money on rehabilitating roads and buildings and schools and stuff. But while that's very important, it was the Minister of Finance, so it was the one disbursing the funds. But while that was important, that it was also very important for them to work on the mindset of people. And I think that's something that the government really needs to take seriously. And we should ask questions. 2023, they're supposed to build 50 mental health care outposts in the Southeast. Have they built those places? And what are they doing about it? We should ask questions. And the reason is because I want to end on a very, very somber note. See, what people went through during the war was crazy, was heavy. But I'll tell you something, and I've said it before. The real sad part of the story is the propaganda that has refused to go away. It's in people's minds. It has destroyed good things in people. So if you have conversation, that's why you cannot have a conversation. I mean, I can have a conversation with a Yoruba person that I don't agree with, you know, and even with different, if Hausa, I've had conversation with a Hausa person or Hausa people, no person, or Fulani, or different ethnicities, pata will not agree. And then we disagree to agree. This thing about being disagreeable, where everything has to go with what people actually think is the truth, even if it's not the truth, you have to make history work according to them. It's a product of something going on in people's minds. It's a mental issue. And the government needs to do better, right? And beyond psychiatric, whatever, the National Rehabilitation Agency needs to know that the war is still going on in some people's minds. And they've got to help, not me, help the next generation of people because they need it. Can you imagine talking to young people and just cursing people out because they think you hate them? Rhetoric like you hate us. Where do you think they got that thing from? It was Zeke that said that in the 1940s. They hate us. We are their victims. Zeke literally gave a speech in 1949 detailing how they were victims of everything. And when you look through every single point he made, now lie. Propaganda, I know. Ojukwu came and dropped his own. So may God heal all of us in Nigeria. We all need help. God will help us. But as good citizens, may God also heal our folks in the Southeast, because it's concerning. Obatala is not an Igbo man. In fact, there was no connection between him. It's a very central figure in Yoruba land. It's so important that our very myth of origin contains his role, right? And he was a king of Ideta. And Ideta is nowhere near Igbo land. And the reason, we'll talk about it tomorrow. All this Igbo kini about Ife, by the way, it's very disrespectful. I'm from Ife. But I don't even have to be from Ife. I just have to be Yoruba. When you're saying that Igbo is Igbo, Igbo mean is Igbo, I know there's something's wrong with your brain. Like there's a major psychiatric problem going on. And I'm going to play some of those things tomorrow. Just to listen, so it doesn't look like somebody's hating on people. Someone just sit down in the corner of, it's not the corner of their room, the corner of their brain, just making up things. Yoruba people were under us. Everybody will be all right. May God bless Nigeria. All right. I think it's time to go. That video was very long, so and Olaiwola says wait for the Orumila version by 2030. Oh God, they should just go and talk to Hausa people again and change the Hausa story. By the time those ones deal with them, they will stop. That's the funny thing. Hausas they would never do this in the north. Never. Why? The answer is simple. 1966. But must such happen before we grow? Just being disrespectful. Then you talk and they say, how are we disrespecting you? Do you want us to be prostrating? Stop changing our history. That's how to be respectful. Stop being stupid. Just change everybody's. Don't worry, no, we'll make that tomorrow. So I can really say what I want to say. Right now, it's just Otin because you mentioned Obatala. And that's one thing. I'm never looking at him as Orisha. Just like as a person, as whether Orisha or person, like how do you change people's history and appropriate their heroes? Well, you don't have any share, so it's understandable. Anyway, first Sean, we'll talk about all of that tomorrow. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you. Someone says, in fact, Adam and Eve are Igbos in view of their claim as ancient tribe. It is well. Anybody can claim whatever they want. You can claim Adam if they want. They shouldn't be claiming Yoruba history and changing Yoruba history. And there's something I've also noticed is going on Twitter. Some of these guys who always fight Yoruba people on behalf of, Igbos, turns out they're unraveling these days. Like many of them have Igbo mothers. Please, if you have Igbo mom, it doesn't mean you should hate Yoruba. There's no reason. Like you can enjoy both. I don't know this kind of inferiority complex that makes people hate the Yoruba side and just make sense. Oh, let's just move away from. Someone says Sunday Igbo is probably from Aba. It's not Aba, it's Aba. Aba Igbo. Ejagbo anthems Kamalole. Someone says they are ancient people, of course. See, if you say you are Adam and Eve and they are from your place, I really would not even argue, because everybody maybe wants to call the first man in their space Adam and the first woman Eve, so that's okay. But you can't be appropriating other people's cultures and heroes. It's disrespectful. Anyway. And we did not colonize these people. If we colonize them now, people will be taking responsibility for the psychiatric whatever. But yeah, Nigeria needs to do better. Your mind says Buhari is a very deep man. He used that dot in a circle jab at the right time. Buhari was actually very, very interesting. Let's say it that way. All right, let's have our anthems and then we'll call it a day. This is Nigerian anthem.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians all are proud to serve our son.
àwa ni ìmọ́lẹ̀ ògo adúláwọ̀ ìmọ́lẹ̀ wo ni wọ́kùn lágbára Ọlọ́run. Ilẹ̀ Yorùbá ò ní bàjẹ́, Nàìjíríà ò ní bàjẹ́, ilé wa ọ̀nà wa kò ní bàjẹ́ lágbára Ọlọ́run. Thank you very much for being part of today's session. I see things in the comment section, even though you guys are not coming up. I mean, what you write in the comment section is enough to actually get me busy or keep me busy. Intele on YouTube says they hate the Yoruba side because of indoctrination from the able mothers. That's sad. And then my battlefield said this from Igodo Migodo. You know, it sounds like Igbo. Oh my God. It is well. God bless every part of this country and everyone who is Nigerian. God bless Yoruba land. And yeah. Hopefully people understand why we're doing this, right? It's important to set the record straight. It's important to also provide alternative, and the alternative has to be the truth. We don't want to be hoodwinked and blackmailed by folks whose, stock in trade is the peddling of propaganda. May God bless everyone, and may we all grow. Thanks for being part of today's session. I'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Ife time, West African time. And I think we're going to be responding to that stuff by the Obi of Onitsha. The claims he made were not only preposterous, they were false and misleading. And it's actually quite sad that an authority figure like that would quote Yoruba authors and then impute to them, right? Or attribute to them what they did not say. It's a shame. And it's very, very disrespectful. And it doesn't matter who is saying it. It's a very disrespectful thing for that to happen. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Have a lovely evening. See you tomorrow at 4 p.m. West African time, Ife time. God bless you. Odaro.